contributed in any way. Employees, chair people, members of this board, and citizens. So thank you very much for the time and the effort that you've shared. Okay, so with that said, we have an agenda. May I accept a motion to accept this agenda, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Okay,
Good guy.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's move forward. So, we're doing this, our agenda includes a follow-up from the prior workshop. We're gonna go start with education, economic development, and transfer station, then anything else other. And then we'll work forward through some of the other budget areas that we have. So, let's get started with the education section. Help me with the page on the education one.
Education is
Section
section
three.
3.
So before we begin with education, I want to provide this board and our citizens an update on what I've learned since our last meeting. Part of the discussion regarding education was the large increase of dollars allocated toward security. And, it was a big number. It happened very quickly. And we looked through that. So I did a little research. One of the things I said is, well, is that the right number? What are we spending that money for? And I was curious whether an assessment had ever gone on. And what I learned is the security system, or the program in place by the town and Board of Education, is actually very well considered. They put a lot of energy and time into that, and there has been not only an assessment, but a regular series of assessments of areas of vulnerability for our students. And so we know that's very important, and we value what it is. So there are two components of that, and I want to address both of them to the town. First was whether or not to hire and arm our now hall monitors that we have. And the second was to have a communications and a crisis action person. And so what I'm contemplating, and I'd like to share with, discuss with the board though, is as a board, I feel almost as though this decision is almost too much for us to decide in our vacuum. And what I'm going to recommend, and we can vote on it shortly, is we omit this from our budgeting process today and invite the Board of Education to put their plan forward a little sooner, or a little later, and allow us to bring it to a town meeting so we can discuss it and vet it out fully. They put a lot of thought into their process, so it wasn't as though I considered that they just it wasn't as though they just came up with an idea and just put a number in there. But I'd like to make sure that the numbers that they use are well considered, and that the people or our town decide, is it money that we want to spend on doing this specific action? And so I'm going to bring that forward as a question or a motion for us on the board to consider. I'm not sure if I should place it as a motion, or do we just move forward on it? Why don't we just put it in record to say that? So I'm going to make a motion that the $150,000, and again, I want to remind us before I complete this motion that we're not saying no, we're just saying at this present time, we're not using our budgeting process through this budget to actually allocate those resources. But I'm going to say that we remove that from the budget process at this time to be considered at a later date. Would anyone like to second that motion?
I second it.
All right, discussion. Harvey, I'll begin with you.
The first question I guess I would ask is, in order for the Board of Ed or whomever to come forward at a later date with more details and perhaps a more fully fleshed out proposal, can they do that absent any funds to carry out what, you know, if they decided that it would be wise to hire some outfit that specializes in this to make suggestions or whatever, do they need a little seed money to do that? I don't know. That's a question. And I think, you know, without absence, you know, in the absence of the thought process, that's all I got.
I do want to communicate that the way the process would work is they would come to our board again with a request. If we agree to doing it, it would go to town meeting, and then that would be the opportunity for the townspeople to really go through the details of the plan that they're looking at.
Yeah, not to,
And that would involve, if we appropriate monies toward that, either a special assessment or some sort of additional tax increase to look at later on, because it's an additional cost that we're looking at considering.
but not to be repetitive, but the question I ask is,
Do they have
if you
enough
take
money
the
to
whole
do this?
150 out, do they then have resources if they want to go outside of, do they have resources to carry out the process that you've outlined?
So let me identify one of those, and that might be a second motion we consider. One of them is that we look at something they need right now, and that's a crisis action plan. How to communicate if there is a crisis, how to get the communication through. And we looked at, for now, at least a one-time cost of that I think can be supported through the budget, our contingency budget on the finance board. So I would be bringing that forward to us and consider doing that for that expense. Thank you. Tracy?
I agree it shouldn't be in the Board of Ed budget to begin with, because it just messes with the number and all the stuff the state has to do with that and all that. So, and I'm naive to the process of how it would go back, like through the town meeting and all that stuff. And then, you know, special assessment, you're gonna send out tax bills for this, or somehow you fund it in the budget and then it comes back next year kind of thing. So I'm just naive to that, but.
Those are actually all options.
Okay, all right.
We would have to decide as a board how we would approach it if that money were to be appropriated.
So right now, so would you keep a line item for it and then like make it zero? Cause I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. I think you kind of need the line item for it.
We could create the line item at any time. Do you agree? Do we need a line item?
You really don't need a line item. It would be a special appropriation,
I
and
know,
how
but
you would fund it would be.
I just think there should, like, if this is what we think, and maybe we don't, because if we don't have the town meeting, we don't know, but if this is what the Board of Ed and then the rest of the town thinks, that there should be something
But we don't know where
specifically
we're
for
gonna
that.
fund that, as you pointed out earlier on. Whether it's gonna be out of the Board of Education or it's gonna be part of the
yeah.
shared services, so we
Yeah.
create a line item, we're making that
Yeah.
decision in
Yeah,
advance.
that's true. I don't know. I'm just asking a lot of questions I don't have answers to,
Those
so. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I guess, like I said, I don't think it should be in Board of Ed, so, if it then comes into town, I don't know. Yeah.
Just as a point of order, the town meeting process isn't for Board of Education, so based on that, I would,
Oh, right.
To appropriate funds, it certainly is.
right.
And we've
but-
done that in the
right.
past.
It's gonna come to us first,
But
and
I
then we'll
would
have
think,
to,
yeah, I just wanted to keep that
we'll
out
make
there.
those decisions in advance.
Lest you confuse the public that they can start bringing any Board of Ed issue through town
No,
meeting
what I'd like to see is a more,
petitions and,
I'd like to see the plan,
right.
bring the plan to us, and then we'll move it to town meeting if we accept it.
And to just clarify Deb's point, it would follow any special appropriation process.
Got it.
Okay. Okay.
Bruce?
Okay, I would agree as well that it shouldn't be in the Board of Ed budget, but I would ask, have we done all we can to make the building safe first before we put people in armed guards, for example? Have we done everything we can to make the building themselves as secure as possible first?
And
I'd
there,
like to see us make the buildings as secure as possible first.
and what I learned is that there is a comprehensive security plan for the buildings. It's well considered, the details of which are not immediately published for the safety of the people inside. But there is a concerted, a plan that they do have in place, and they continually both monitor and update it, and to keep compliance with the state. I believe they have to do it every 2 years.
All right, so someone's keeping an eye on that to make sure we've done
Now,
everything we can.
in addition, what I've learned is they're doing things like drills. They're doing a lot of active things on a regular basis to continue with that security. It was my. In fact, I may want to defer to you, Brian. Would you like to share any more about some of that?
Well, I think you've done a great job of researching it. I mean, we do a fair amount of work to make sure our people are ready, to make sure that people are looking for the right things. We do a lot of work in the area of changing our drills. So, because one of the things that happens is you throw a wrench into, somebody throws a wrench into how things are supposed to go, or it's at a time when you would never plan a drill, and then you're not prepared. We've done that. We've also, done a lot of work in terms of having everybody have a piece of being an observer, which is a very important part of a security plan, because you want to make sure that you don't have unwelcome guests on site. The other piece I would just emphasize is our local police are very much involved with our security group, the safety and security team that meets on a monthly basis, and really give us a lot of their insights as well. So there's quite a bit of work that's being done. As I said, I think in the previous meeting, security is one of those things where, it's very hard to say where is that line of, okay, we've done enough, or are we doing too much? And with the news being what it is these days, and all the things happening currently, the right answer is something that I think every Board of Education, and for that matter, boards of finance, are having to wrap their heads around. Not an easy situation.
In doing my research, it's almost like it's one of those impossible tasks to completely eliminate a risk. What you try to do is just say, okay, what we want to do is just minimize any kind of possible negativity, and they're doing their best to, on a regular basis, to continue doing that.
Yeah, if I can, I think there's like two parts to this. One is what to do if there's a problem, and I think that's well handled within the Board of Ed and the facilities and all that stuff. The other thing is, how do you talk about it? How do you get it out that this is what we've done? And not that we're giving away the plan. I don't want to do that part, but if something happens, how do we tell everybody about that? And I think that's part of the thing that.
And so the
really,
crisis response is going to happen right away. We're not going to delay moving forward with that at all. I'm not sure, but we brought forward to the selectmen a group that comes in and can write the crisis response plan, and involves all the leaders of all the respective areas. And we're going to take money out of our contingency to allocate toward that, assuming he approves that. And
Okay.
and that'll get initiated as soon as our budget meetings are over, like within the next 30 days.
Okay.
That's our intent. So we can move forward with the concerns that, how do we address certain issues?
Right,
And
yeah.
then on this, how we handle the security issue, we'll come back and look at later. Greg, did you have any comment?
Based on the discussions I just heard, I'm comfortable with the recommendation, knowing that, number one, the process is going to continue, and the possibility to restore funding for it, or obtain funding for the recommendations. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Anything else?
Nothing.
Todd?
Thank you. I think it's fair to say everybody wants an adequate security system in their schools. And I'm hearing that we have a security system already. It's well thought out. And the question on the table, I think, is a plan. The Board of Education has expressed a desire to come up with an enhancement to the security system, the current security system. And that comes down to the question that we as Board of Finance members are responsible for. Is $150,000 going to be useful and necessary to enhance the security system? Or is it going to be something less than that? Or maybe even more, depending on what the assessment is. So in order to answer that question about how well spent the $150K is going to be, we need a good plan. So we're asking for a plan for the Board of Education to come back with a plan to us, the Board of Finance, and then we'll decide how much that's going to cost, and then we'll decide whether that's appropriate or not, and then we're going to take it to the town as well. The legislative body will ultimately decide approve the amount, right? So this is kind of a good deal. We're asking for a solid plan, like in any other thing in life, and then we're not saying no to this. Go do it. We want to see a good plan. Then come back to us. We'll scrub the plan, scrub the cost, and then take it to the town. And if we've got a good presentation to the town, then we'll approve it, and we're done. Did I say it right?
You said it better than me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other discussion? Vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passed. All right, what else on education? So I invited our superintendent and chairman of the Board of Education to come today. And so what I'd like to do is to see, do you have any specific questions on, now that we're looking at their budget? And I remind you, they have communicated with me that they were able to get some significant cost reductions, passing on another $100,000 reduction in their budget that they presented to us last week. So at present, when we're looking at the number, just remember, we just removed 150, 100 is being removed also, so now we're just gonna look into the other details, okay? So why don't I just move around the table and see if there's anything specifically we'd like to discuss. Harvey, why don't you go forward?
Pass.
Okay.
So the benefit, it was benefits and price of oil, right? Is
Yes,
what-
health benefits and price of
So
oil.
the total was 100?
Correct.
Okay. I was just gonna write on here, but I guess I can't. Okay.
Did you have any, are you?
I just wanted to clarify.
Nothing specific from me.
Just to reiterate again, the benefits, it's a reduction in expenses, not a reduction in coverage to the employees, correct?
Correct. Just to add to that, it's a reduction in premium. So as we get closer, the insurance company continues to adjust, and so it can go north and it can go south. We were the beneficiaries of our good experience in the health insurance area, and that was very helpful to us. So our percentage increase per premium is 7.5% now, which if you go back 2 years, that means we are net zero for 2 years of health insurance, which is for 1/4% for net of our health insurance increase in terms of each premium for this year and next year. So that's unheard of. I've
Great
never
job.
seen that.
Yeah.
So we're very excited about it. I'd love to take credit, but I think much.
Before I move on to you,
Good job.
Todd, what I'd like to do is share with the group that I reached out to the chairman of the Board of Education as well, and I noticed a few things that were some substantial increases in their proposed budget, and I went back and forth a little bit to try to determine if there was some ability for them to help support my goal and our board's goal of not increasing the mill rate more than a certain amount. And so I did go back and ask if they could help us support some cut and reduction in their budget without affecting the programs that they offer. And I'm gonna ask if you would, Brian, they did come back, and would you mind sharing with us what you can do, where it might be cut? We had a number that we went back and forth with a little bit, but it was around $50,000. Is that still okay with your group, and can you articulate where that might be coming from?
So my finance subcommittee would need to take that back officially and work through that. But if they were to take my recommendation, it would kind of be a balanced portfolio kind of recommendation. And that would be to take a little bit from some of the equipment items we talked about last week. That would be to maybe even curve back. It'll make Ms. Vericchio a little nervous, but curve back insurance a little bit. Curve back our tuition just a little bit. And have those just be less conservative estimates as to where we're going to end up. And $50,000 is something we can handle because it would not, it's under the threshold of being able to really go into staffing areas. So, and we've done very, very well this year in terms of things have worked out well. So we're not. In past years, at this point, we've been in a freeze for a few months. So predicting exactly where we're going to end up in terms of all supplies and equipment and things is a little more difficult when you've frozen all your accounts.
Okay.
The worst scenario would be we would start with a soft freeze in the fall, and just meaning if we don't have to buy it now, we don't, just to make sure we're okay. But even that, I don't think would necessarily be necessary.
Thank you. Todd, I'll let you ask any questions you might have.
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you very much for the reductions.
May I?
Yes, sir.
Not to prolong today's session, but I would be interested in the future to talk a little bit about the size of the risk pool. Who's covered, and let me start all over again, because I'm obviously not communicating what I'm interested in. In figuring the rates, the premiums, is the experience upon which that is based only, for example, the teachers in, professional staff or whatever in East Haddam, or is the risk pool every credentialed educator in Connecticut, or?
Okay, so I can answer that question. Our town itself has one vendor for health insurance and is one account. So while there are minor differences in types of coverage, everybody in town, Board of Education and everyone else, and town employees, anybody who gets insurance, it uses Connecticut insurance currently. And so those rates are based on the experience of the entire district, town, employee base.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
I reserve the right to follow up on this.
So, well, and we use
in
an
the future.
insurance consultant in town, so I would encourage, if the Board of Finance was curious about how we do and how, that he would certainly, I'm sure, be willing to talk to the group about what kind of things they consider. Joe is very actively engaged in making sure we get the best rates, and so I think he probably gets more credit for the 0% in 2 years than I can take. Although I'd love to, but gotta be fair.
A topic for another day. Thank you.
Does the town get any benefit from this either, or?
No, because if you recall, I indicated we budget for census, and I've had a change. So I will not recommend reducing the town's insurance. It would have been nice.
And the town side is much smaller in terms of the numbers, so $20,000 or $25,000 for one employee is a lot more
Right.
than the $3 million pool that we work from.
I just figured if, it's all the same pool, we should all.
Well, the
go down by
town's
zero.
rates have gone down, yes.
Yeah.
But because the census has changed, I'm not recommending any changes to our insurance.
Very good. All right, so what we'll do, Board of Ed, we're gonna move on, but if you don't mind staying just a little longer, because we do have some questions on the shared services side, and we'll address those so that you can support that. Did you have another question?
I have
too,
another
Tom?
question. Sorry, I forgot to ask this earlier. Now, I don't mean we're gonna settle it today, but I've looked at the state data for cost per student, for enrollment, for the area towns as well as towns similar to East Haddam, and it appears from the state data that the cost per pupil for us is a lot higher than towns of similar size to East Haddam and towns in the local area as well. So I would like to understand the breakdown of costs, why, using the state data, our town seems to be a very expensive place to send a child to school. If you can explain that right now, it'd be fine, but if it's going to take some research, I understand that.
So I think it would take some research to do that. There's a variety of things that go in. I will tell you that there's a few things that you have to consider when you do that. There's a lot of variability, but we are right in the middle in terms of towns like us. So the variability is, if a town does not have a high school, and you look at the numbers that come in from the state, if the town doesn't have a high school, you're always going to see lower rates because high schools are always more expensive to fund. There is an economies of scale of not having a large high school. That is when you see towns that are significantly, that show a nice rate, they have a significantly sized high school typically. So, and that is the best place to save money. That being said, we don't live in a town that has a highway right through it. And I'm glad you don't, or I don't live in this town. So, sorry, I didn't mean to suggest I did. I'd love to, but I don't. But because of that, we have such unique situations in terms of our transportation, in terms of our locations, that there is an issue there as well. It's the type of community. There's other communities very close to us who can have all their kids to school in 30 minutes, or 35 minutes, and then do significant routes. With our 2 routes, our students are on the bus for over an hour typically, which is really long. So we can look at other areas, but if you look at school systems that are very similar to us, that are K-12, all self-contained, that have a smaller population, we're right there. If you only look at towns that have just the K-8, yes, you'll find towns that do things less expensively, but the rates for high schools are always higher just because it's a more expensive program.
If I may, Todd, I want to point out, because this question seems to come up often.
Correct.
And it's almost a hard question to deal with, because if you're looking at, we're looking at averages, and if we have a spike in population, a lot of the houses get sold and young families move in, then that number gets changed immediately. But it doesn't necessarily mean we're increasing the number of dollars spent on students, because we do have a lot of capacity in our school system to bring in more students without having to outlay additional costs. We don't need to buy new buildings or complete new buildings. I think it's kind of important to just keep that aspect of it in mind. I think the better question that we want to ask, and we will continue to ask, and I think we'll even get in more detail, is when we're looking at expenses, what certain things that we can do to both improve the school system and yet save money. And that's the place I want to be. I want to be offering an effective education system. So places where I'm looking, and perhaps we can have continued dialogue, is in the area of special education, where we become a hub of offering great special education programs so our students don't want to leave, and we can almost attract students from other communities to come and bring their children here, and thus tuition revenue would increase as well. So that's kind of the thought process I think we're considering. And we've talked about that more, and we'll continue to discuss that further. Great.
We're also in a position where, with a 0.44 increase last year, I think you're also going to see other systems rise. I think the other piece that I would throw in there is that in the current ECS formula, you're going to watch you're gonna watch other towns lose a lot of money in the next few years, and you're gonna watch other towns. So I think the expenditure formula, and how it looks is going to change. And if we continue to have, to look at continuing to be more efficient as we have, and continue to have a good program, I think we're gonna see that equalize more. I think there's some numbers out there that just aren't really accurate, in terms of comparison.
Well, one of the reasons I asked the question is that devil's in the details.
Sure.
And as Bill says, this question keeps coming up. I keep getting asked the question myself. So the devil's in the details, and I would like to learn the details. As time goes on, I will. And perhaps we can achieve what Bill talked about, which I agree 100%. Improve the school system, reduce costs, attract more students. Then we have success. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so what we'll do now is, the next items on our agenda are the EDC, transfer station, and other. So I'm gonna now ask,
Just to give you a heads up, EDC is meeting at 10 a.m., then they'd like to come in to talk to you.
okay, that's fine.
Okay.
You know what I'd like to do on the EDC is I would like to maybe ask our first selectman to perhaps just highlight a couple of these items. If you've had some they've come to you and spoken with you?
They have.
And so you've been able, because our last meeting had the EDC, not thinking they thought they were getting budgeted for the director position, and their budget had been completely changed, and so that's the reason they're returning today. Has a negotiation been kind of processed between the two?
Yes, we've been looking at that and made it very clear that we're not going to have the director's position at $85,000, to bring someone in who is going to kind of get to know the town and cost us an awful lot of money while they look. They did want to have a coordinator position, as we've had in the past, and we agreed that that's not unreasonable, and we're looking to put some money back in for that. And the handout you've got there shows the $17,000, which is consistent with the past year. They do have a purchase professional service of $24,000. We've talked to them about that, and the thought is to not do that, to put perhaps $4,000 in there, and then let them come back when they find someone with a package that they want to work with, and add to it again. They can't operate without a certain amount of money, and that coordinator's position, if it's handled properly, is very important.
Okay, now, may I ask Cindy a question? This revised number, reinstating some of the budget monies, what is the delta from what we saw last week to this week?
That would be, one moment, please. That's why they're meeting as a group to review this and then come to you guys.
I just want, if I
Yeah.
could just have a rough idea on that, and that'll move us along quickly with that sort of section.
It's a change to your budget of $39,160.
39,000?
The key points here are adding the coordinator position in, and then there was $4,000 budgeted for purchase services, and they're asking for $24,000. What they'll be discussing at their 10 o'clock meeting and coming to
Okay,
you.
we'll let them do that. I just wanted to kind of give a heads up on that, let the selectmen explain the numbers. We could get into more detail when they come. I don't want to count that. If you would then, would you like to brief us on the transfer station, or do you want to have Bob come up and do his point on it?
Well, I think if Bob could be brief in terms of his presentation and review that again for everyone.
And Linda made enough copies, we have these copies as well to share.
Oh, here.
Oh, you already did?
So I want to start, before you start speaking, Bob, I want to start by offering some gratitude to the selectmen for taking the initiative they were canceled on Wednesday, and rather than kind of leaving us in a flux, they had their presentation this morning at 8 o'clock, and a couple of us were able to attend and see some of this presentation already. But I just do want to thank the selectmen group because you allowed it, facilitate us to have something decided so that we can move this forward. And I also want to thank, and you guys will probably echo this when I'm, after he's done speaking, the work that that committee has done. You're gonna see it's been pretty well thought, and we're gonna have good things happening. So with that, please speak.
Okay, does everyone have a copy of the letter that I just read earlier today?
Yep.
Has everyone read it? If you haven't, just take it.
Dated March 21?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know whether you want me to go through what I did with them by reading the letter, that's up to you, I'm more than happy to do that. I would do that for the public, not so for you, if you know, what would you like me to do?
If you could highlight just the higher points.
Okay, so, the first selectman, formed the committee.
Bob, take my chair, so you're not back.
Come on down.
Thank you. Back in August of 17, the selectmen made a resolution to form a committee to study the transfer station and so forth. We've been meeting for our first meeting was in the beginning of January, and we've met for a couple of months. Had a couple of resolutions and so forth. And Mr. Chairman, I want to say that I really took, in looking at the way that you've run this committee and so forth, I really felt that that you were really speaking on behalf of the community in the way that you ran this committee. And I tried very much, coming from a different area, not understanding your political process, not understanding the town meeting form of government, selectman form of government, I realized that maybe your responsibility running a committee like that becomes even greater, because you do represent the entire committee. So I tried to follow that path. And so I took a very community-centric way of giving me a path to go on, rather than trying to see an end and getting to that end. I tried to put myself in the position of, we're all part of this committee, we're all volunteers, one of them's here today, Vinny, and that we should look at the interests of the community first, and then everything else second. In this case, there's an important thing that we were considering, and that was the environmental things and recycling and so forth. However, I put that second to the interests of the community. So having said that, everything that we did here had to do with how do we lower our costs, because in the end, the costs land up in your mill rate, and that's what you did. And I'll go now and say the little handout that you just got from me, it forced me, because what you were going to ask me today is how much can we get out of you immediately out of lowering costs so that our mill rate can be lower. And you adequately said, I want to get to a certain point, and what contribution can this transfer station do in terms of cost reduction in doing that? So I used, and the first selectman had a very serious interest in the environment and the state's desire to go and in fact they've said their goal is 60% recycling by 2024. That's a tremendous. We are right now, our numbers are 21.7%. It's below what the norm in this area is, and it's certainly going to be a challenge to attain that number. Perhaps that 60% in fact is unrealistic. However, the data shows that where people do go and they implement these type systems, or whether it be a hybrid system or a strict bag system, because either ones can be done depending upon what the town wants to do here, that recycling rates tend to go up. And in fact, Portland I used as a model. And they reached 40% by adopting this type of system. That's what they get now. Well, then what is the impact should we go and be able to attain 40%? And that, in the document that you got, that I just gave out today, in fact goes, and it says this is what will be the impact of doing that. I did a comparison of, though we visited 4 different sites, we did an impact, I did a financial analysis on 3 of them. That would have been our own, our own, I'm talking too much today, East Haddam. We examined Essex, and we examined Portland. Portland was particularly handy because they're a community of essentially the same size as ours. They have 9,500 residents, and we have 9,100 residences. So that seemed to be a good model. In fact, that was one in Connecticut that seemed to address what the deep people that are pushing the idea of a bag plan, okay, they would say, well, that in Connecticut, that's a good model for us. So we took a very careful look. We visited with them, and their director of public works shared his budget with us and so forth. And what I was able to do is construct a model that brought down cost to cost per person. Because until I could get to some number that's valid, it really, all it is, oh, you save this, you save that, and then the public doesn't say, how does that relate to me? So one of the things I'll do in the end, we're gonna say that hypothetically, by adopting some of these measures, that the total cost reduction could be over $300,000. So I would say to you, what does that mean in mill rate? Okay, and I don't have that, I don't know that now, because there's been some disagreement over how many people there are, how many residences there are, and so forth.
I can tell you right now, that's representing about 1% of our town's operating budget, because we're at a $30 million.
So it's a big deal.
It's
a big deal for a little thing. So this is the results that we came out with. The results were, in Portland, the cost to operate that transfer station is $26.56. What that means is, for every person, that every residence of East Haddam, young and old, Portland, it's $26.56. I ran through the exact same numbers. We took the public works budget of $615,000. They said they were going to have revenue of about $40,000. And the numbers, as it is today, status is $63.26. And I say in my very next paragraph why we pay $63.26 per person for our transfer station, and Portland pays $26.50, should be alarming. It's a big difference. So then you say, why is that happening? What are the factors that are making that happen? One of them is that we're the only town, perhaps there's one other, but Durham and Mansfield and Durham are together, I believe. They've announced that they no longer will allow carters into their transfer station. So whether that makes us the only place in Connecticut or one of 2, certainly that's one of them. And as you look through the document that I gave you that has to do with cost, things that drive down cost, you'll see that the number one driver of cost down is the fact that we don't that by not paying the tipping fees for our haulers, we save $86,000. So, one would say, if you didn't allow haulers in the past, this has been a horrendously contentious issue through this town. You've had two committees, just like this one, say this was an issue. In fact, in the last one, I understand the only thing you were asking them to pay was the transportation fee. It was ridiculously small, yet all the town residents, you have a town meeting form of government, and unfortunately, it provides for the minority to decide what happens. Because what happens is you land up with very concerned citizens dedicated towards one approach. They show up en masse, and oftentimes the will of the majority is left out. At least that's my perception of it, may be wrong. So what I wanted to do is come up with a resident-centric thing that would benefit absolutely all people, so I brought it down to the cost per person. And whether you use a carter or whether you don't use a carter, the savings that are implied in this document and what will happen if you adopt it is the same for all. It's absolutely the same. And so what we were able to do is I identify certain places of savings. We have the tipping fee from that. We also know that because of the increase in recycling that happens because of this, we'll have a savings of about $30,000. We also know there'll be an increase in recycling. We take monies. The recycling money goes away because the haulers bring recycled materials, so we no longer get that. So you see a very modest thing because I have to take that away and then put in our increase, which came out to about $500, $498. There's an enormous savings from hauling, which you've already, I understand you may be including in the budget already, okay? I'm not an accountant, but I do know if you expense it, you have to take the expenses away, and if you simply buy it out of capital budget, you can attain that entire savings. So I would encourage you that should you have the money to do that. In the last meeting, you heard me say I was greatly concerned with the number of containers that you purchase. I think that that's an add-on to that, and it will affect your capital budget, but not this. There was a significant problem that was identified in the bulky waste area. Okay, I went into length about this. I suggested that I believe you may have left the meeting, but when I started to get into this, and I don't know whether Cindy, whether you were in that, but I'm very strong about that in business you have costs that are incurred need to be allocated to the correct cost center. Okay? And so when I brought this document up, which certainly is very troubling, and I gave this to a number of people, and when I first did it, it did not have this item called profit loss on it. So when people looked at it, I said, oh yeah, I guess there's a problem here. And then all of a sudden, when I handed it out again, and it had P&L, and it saw that minus 4,700, which is essentially break even. This is when you go and you have bulky waste. Largely, it's construction materials, but it could be when you have an old chair that you want to throw out. Something like that, it's going to go into bulky waste. And you're supposed to go to we have a scale, you're supposed to go over the scale, they weigh your car, whatever you have. You go up there, you put it in there, you come back, you weigh your car, it gives you a small bill. I did this just a couple of weeks ago. I paid my $13 and I went home happy. I was happy that the town had a service that allowed me to do that. Otherwise, what am I going to do with this chair? I saw it as a problem. Well, what we've seen since starting in 1913 and then really starting in 14 and then presiding through that, we saw the amount of bulky waste going up and the revenue going down to the point now where we started at minus $4,000 and the first selectman says, I'm happy with being break even, to now to the point that we're at minus 52,000. This is troubling, very troubling. So you look for reasons on why. So then I started questioning. I talked to the first selectman. I spoke to a number. Went down to the dump. I said to the transfer station. And, well, we have to take in a lot of materials. Because I said, we're getting revenue from 21% of what we're supposed to get. Because if it says ton, we charge $100 a ton, it's 850 tons, we're supposed to get $85,000. We got 21. So that means that 79% weren't paying. Where does that come from? And I've lived here for a year and a half, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have all the answers in there, but I will ask the people. Okay, so they identified a number of places. They said that the town takes their bulky waste and they deposit it in there. Well, I would say to Cindy, why doesn't that go into a different should that go into the transfer station? Probably not. Probably should go into some general other thing. We have not-for-profits. They told me that not-for-profits are allowed to come into that sometime when the dump is closed. And they come in there and they deposit it. Well, I would say to you, if I'm a nonprofit and I need to go and buy a copier, I can't go to Best Buy and say, oh, well, I'm a not-for-profit, so give me the copier for free. There is no difference here. This is a service as opposed to a commodity. So you need to examine it. If the town meeting says, yes, we want to do that, just understand that I may not like that not-for-profit. And I don't see why I have to pay for that. Okay, so that's a question that you have to ask yourself. Is that a policy that you want to do it? If the people say yes, then that's under your form of government, then the answer is yes. The school. I was told, oh, the school goes, they hire people and they bring lots of stuff in here. And we simply absorb it. So that is potential. I would say to you, school has their own budget that should be allocated to the costs associated with the school, not the transfer station. And then the last one is we have people from either in town or out of town depositing bulky waste into that. With that, we don't have enough controls having to do with people accessing. We currently have a free sticker system that's given out very easily. All you have to do is show your license on it, and they give you a sticker. Well, I could give them another and say, oh, I need 2, or I need 3. And I could give that to my son then. He lives in Colchester, and then he could put it on his car and he could come in. So the point was, I said in this document, I've said to you that we need a little bit tighter control there, and that it would be very wise to have a system. And the town clerk said, I have software that might be of assistance here that would include both a proof of residency and also a registration. Okay? Now, I understand that people might have it registered in Colchester but live in East Haddam. So that's fine. You can still do that. Right? That's not a problem. Okay? And could I use? So what it is it's tightening up the system. Personally, given the size of this $52,000 thing, Cindy, I think that for the time being, you need to have an audit trail of what's happening here, because there's a systemic problem here that needs to be resolved. And so that can be done, and I'm sure you can put some type of auditing in there. Personally, I said to my wife, I said, if a toothpick gets put in there, there should be an audit trail on it. Now, I'm being a little bit over the top here, but certainly there's a need to do that, because this shows. We see these numbers going up and up and up and up. I can tell you that these numbers are higher in terms of the tonnage of what similar communities have. If you go and look at the supporting materials behind this, and you look at the Portland, there's some handwritten notes on it and says the amount of bulky waste in there. I think it's 320. Ours is 850. Why is that? All right? So those are the questions you have to answer. So having said that, I believe that where are the opportunities? I mentioned earlier that I had to go and finish the final report before I spoke to you, because I had to identify what can we do now, what kind of savings can we put in this year's budget that don't have to go and get approved at town meeting. Okay, and those areas, one you've already addressed. Okay, certainly, and that's the biggest one. And then the second one was, I believe that with perhaps a small capital expenditure, you can buy a gate that automatically opens when you go up the hill. Excuse me, does not open. It doesn't open when you go up the hill.
We have now.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have no gate. Yeah, that's what you have. So what you do is they make ones that you drive up to it and then your arm comes down and then you leave. So if certainly on the way out, that's the way we would want to have it. We create some procedures with the first selectman, the Beth, and the workers that are up there, that basically encourage people is that if you're going to go up there, you need to go and speak briefly. And I've had systems like this. It's not a terrible thing. You know, I've been trying to stop you now. Having said that, where I used to live, you just stop by a little booth. He had a scale there. He looks at you and says, "What do you got?" It wasn't very invasive. It was just, "What do you got?" You tell him what you got, and he goes, "Go down there." If it's brush, we didn't get charged for brush. We didn't get charged for this. But there were certain things that we did. And if you had one of those things, he'd waste your truck, he'd go around, get rid of it, So you have to have some rules. One of the problems in talking to the fellows, they say, well, if I see a little old lady that has 20 pounds worth of stuff that goes into there, I really don't want to charge them. So the numbers that are in here, this break even, that accounts for allowing 14% that you're not collecting. Okay? Have your own rules, but have the rule and say, listen, this is what it is. We don't want to go and be so invasive but if you have 100 pounds or 50 pounds, you do have to
So
pay.
you've identified, and again, I want to thank you for the work that you and your committee have done. I mean, these numbers are meaningful, extremely meaningful and well-researched. And what I'm seeing here as a board are two things. One is the items that you're discussing today are management-related issues.
They're all management related.
But the other one is a way we do recycling and collection of
That's
kind of stuff in the
not,
town.
perhaps, you're not, yeah.
That's not something that I think we can realize in today's budget.
You
And
can't.
So for the purpose of our board, I want to make sure that you understand that we will be realizing some savings this year through the acquisition of that truck, because we're going to have immediate savings. And after having some discussion, we do have we have a reserve money set aside that we can allocate the monies and purchase the truck instead of leasing under before. And that will save us, Cindy, $34,000. So it's going to be my recommendation that we use those funds to purchase the truck and save that 34, so we don't have to include that in our cost structure. That's gonna lower, it's gonna keep getting you toward that goal of saving some taxes. In addition to that, these implementation strategies ought to really go forward. I want to point out that after speaking with Beth following our Tuesday meeting, I learned that this is a real serious issue because our existing compressor, that we call it the hopper, is on its, last leg. It can go down anywhere between next month and 6 months out. So they may be coming to us for some capital expense if we don't move forward on this committee's recommendation. So I had to leave shortly during your presentation. What I don't know, and maybe you can address this, Emmett, what is after they made their recommendations, which I think are great, what is your step next to move this forward for town meeting so we can get this system in place?
We have to identify concrete plans for each of these items, how we want to do it. And depending on how we move forward, the equipage we're going to need is going to be, it can be very different. So that question of the RAM, which is got a month to 6 months to live, compels us to move fast because the devices we're going to want to be very different depending on how we implement this. And there's no point in spending a lot of money to repair what we've got right now if in the end we want something very different.
Agreed. And so I guess
We have to move quickly to identify
so
just where we're going to go.
Your board, I know you have to review with your group what you're moving forward. We want to just point out the need to take your great plan and get the details to them so that we could get that and vote on it and move it forward, because we think it's you know, these numbers are very sound and they look great, and the ideas are all really important. And we agree to implement all the steps. Now, there may be some capital that we need to consider, and we would like to see that as quickly as we can so we can evaluate that. I overheard you in your last meeting talking about covering the bulky waste containers, because that would save us money at some point, and maybe when purchasing those containers, look at something with a retractable cover.
Pass this on to you.
One of the thoughts I have in that, and some of the other board members mentioned it to me also, was if there's some expense that might involve maybe building a awning or some sort of cover over that, consider it. You know, as long as it's not a $20 million project or something crazy, you know, something that's permanent that would ultimately save us money, I think that would be really
Yeah,
useful.
there's two things, and what Emmett was just, the first selectman was just mentioning is that there would be a change in, there would not be a requirement to have that same configuration that you have now. What Portland does, what Essex does, is they simply have two of these devices. These are chutes. They're about 4.5, 5 inch feet wide. Drive up to the chute, you dump your stuff in, you put the bulky weight, the MSW, that would be the garbage on one side, non-recyclables, you put the other one in, you're out, it's done, okay? That would avoid those costs. In the past, they've talked about $350,000, $400,000 for, you know, that's within the last one that I saw. I don't believe that you'd have costs or anything associated. One of our members, actually the fellow that runs the Essex transfer station, offered to come up and draw a sketch, though, you know, you'd probably have to do an engineer and all that type of thing to really get a hard number on what it did. But right now, given your current configuration, if this plan was accepted for the time being, and again, I believe that there needs to be, I would encourage you to think about that if we're able to save you $300,000 a year, that some of those monies be allocated towards the upgrade of this facility. It's been left alone for a long, long time. I believe the working conditions, where these guys eat and meet their meals, I think that needs to be upgraded as well.
Well, I was gonna ask you this question. It happens to be one of the best social places in our town. Have you considered maybe putting coffee? I mean, facetious, but.
I understand. I'm just commenting.
Everybody goes and meets at the-
There's a need
at
to
the
change
transfer
the
station.
configuration on the top. There's a need to do some things on the top having to do with covering the bulky waste area so that you'll reduce the cost further. And there's some changes that have to happen. I'm not an expert on what those changes would be at this time, but, you know, perhaps if I spoke to Mike, he was asked to get together maybe with Jim and try to do that. If the town has some engineering people that they work with that can give you a quick estimate of that, would it be? What do I think? Probably a couple $100,000, I would think.
So put the work into that. I'm gonna ask if can have my board go through and if they have any comments or questions. Did you have any?
Just before the board begins, the Board of Selectmen heard about this morning, so there's a process. Like anything in government, our wheels don't move very quickly. So the great work that this committee has done now needs to go through the Board of Selectmen for their
Right.
discussion and ultimately through the whole process of anything else to change that.
Thank you for reminding us, because we're not where we want to be yet. And that
Correct.
has to be vetted out properly through the process. Agreed. So if we could limit our questions mainly to maybe the recommendations of the board thoughts that are going here. We know that this committee does not manage the transfer station, so those questions would be reserved to Beth, and we can address those with her later on if you want. We can invite her back on Tuesday. So
Yeah, just understand, I have no authority to do anything. What we're empowered to do is to make a recommendation to the selectmen.
So I'm gonna ask if we could limit our questions to those that might be addressing this committee. Go ahead.
The only question I have, because this whole process needs to work out, is of the numbers on this handout, they total up to 307,
6.
306,980.
$307,000.
Yep.
How much do we take, can we legitimately incorporate into this coming year's budget?
and we did, well, the truck,
You did the truck,
so the truck is going,
So
we're
the
gonna
hundred
allocate
and
the
eight
truck, and that's
grand
gonna be.
is what, is it?
right?
Okay, end of discussion. Right, because the rest of it has to work
Right,
through
that's,
the
that's, a-
process.
that's an
Right.
immediate payback on that idea,
Right,
so.
but the rest of it has to work through, so
Right,
take 100 grand and be happy.
that's,
It's a nice start.
that's a good start, right. Tracy?
Right, yeah, we can't do any of this, this is
This'll
all
be,
nice,
we'll start
but
seeing
yeah.
the, if this gets through this year, we'll start seeing the benefit of this next year.
Right.
And
Right,
they
but-
with their operating budget.
I
And
mean,
they may be coming to us next year, we may not see anything at all, because they may say, we need some capital outlay, and we're gonna have to look at that capital to help support the reconfiguration of the transfer station, or purchasing of things.
Right, I would hope, my hope is that some of this could be implemented past our budget season and we would benefit from it as soon as possible. That if there is some sort of capital need that's done or whatever, that it come to us and then it would, the town meeting, however this process works, I still don't get it, but you know, that we don't have to wait a year for all this, you know, that this is just throwing money away, you know?
Can you address that, in terms of a,
We're gonna
Timing.
move as quickly as we can.
okay.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, this $34,000 savings to your budget, it's still in the capital budget, it's just that you're not gonna pay for it through taxation. So
Right.
it's still part of the capital plan, just to be clear.
Right.
Okay.
Bruce?
In the interest of time, I'll get my answers at another time.
Great work. I like all the detail. I've read it, starting last week.
Wait till you see the final report.
It's,
That has a
well,
lot-
it's important stuff, and the
Yeah.
dollars add up fast.
Yeah.
So keep up the good work. The only thing I had was eventually, I think we're gonna have to associate the costs of, the fuel maintenance and
Yes,
insurance on
absolutely.
that vehicle.
I mentioned in it that I
Yeah,
did,
in one of the sheets, so eventually we'll need to see that number, but everything I've read so far I like, and I've lived in other towns and dealt with other transfer stations, I think you're going down the right path. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the work of the committee, hours spent, and the report written, the data gathered. I love data.
really.
Data tells you a lot. People don't use data enough in this world today, even though I have all these computers. But thank you very much for doing that. I'm trying to make this simple and short, but you want to stop the bleeding. I hear a lot of bleeding going on at the transfer station, bleeding with people coming that don't live in town, dumping their waste, bleeding with...
Those are assumptions.
Those are assumptions, yes. Yeah, they're assumptions. And the bleeding with the bulk waste tank containers being open to the weather. So we're paying for hauling water, we're paying for dumping water. That's something that should be stopped immediately. We can cover those containers now with tarps. I know it's a pain for the truck.
Again, I want to point out that the committee agrees with you,
Yeah.
but it's not their role to supervise, so they're just making recommendations. This would go to, Beth.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's all about management. As far as the truck, I had the same question Greg mentioned, but I want to say, no additional employees. If we purchase this truck, use this truck, mean no additional staff. It'll be our same staff driving this truck.
Again, this is a Beth question.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
also a
And
cost.
the answer is yes. The answer is
Also a
yes.
cost. So, I see a short-term plan, cost benefit of a short-term plan, and I see a cost benefit of a long-term plan. And I agree, I think Greg mentioned it, or somebody did, that we need to be careful to make the proper investments while we're doing this for upgrades. So use our savings to invest. And I guess
Yes.
that's a management plan, I understand.
Yes.
But all this comes down to money. Money available, money spent. I'm a big guy for cost benefit analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again. Your work is excellent, and we're very happy. Thank you, committee, too. We appreciate all the hard work you guys.
Good work.
As I told the last one, if I do much more work, I may be looking for a new place to live.
Well, you're not getting the
Pay you?
generous
Right?
pay package?
So,
Right, yeah.
Here's
The benefits are good.
Cindy, is it, we do shared services now. Can I bump that up?
Nice, and then we.
That way I
report it
can
back.
let the
Yeah.
other groups move forward. So I have on the budget, it says budget workshop follow-up, other. EDC is going to, are they,
They're meeting at 10 in meeting room.
so they're not here yet. They'll be joining us shortly.
Yeah.
If I may, on the bottom, we had budget areas as time allows, share services. I'd like to call that other and bring it up. Is that acceptable are we able to do that, Cindy?
You've got every topic listed on your agenda as time allows, so you've got.
All right, so where do we find share services?
Section 4. And I was asked a question right before the meeting convened about the maintenance funds and how that amount's determined and what happens with the money that doesn't get spent. And just to give you an idea, we budget $125,000 a year for the Board of Ed Maintenance Fund, and in the last 3 years, it's averaged $122,500. And we budget $75,000 for the Town Maintenance Fund, and the past 3-year average has been $54,400. So the thing with shared services is the money rolls forward every year in its own fund. It doesn't go back to the general fund. And in fact, when we've had savings in salaries and benefits, we've turned it back to the town to be used for capital.
Do you want to give a highlight of any significant changes here? And then we can allow,
The only change is to increase to wages, and we can absorb it with fund balance. In addition, the selectmen voted to transfer $38,400 in excess salary and benefits to the capital plan. And to be clear, we went, and Brian can elaborate as well, we went time without a full-time operations director and without a tech help person. So we had salaries and benefits that went unspent. And then, and some of our new hires didn't require the benefits of the former employees. So all that savings has been transferred out, and in fact, the shared services budget goes down every year. Or in this case, we're holding it flat.
okay. I'm going to invite my board to ask questions. Harvey, do you have any questions on it? Tracy?
I don't know.
As you're looking through that, may I ask a question and then you
Yeah,
can
go
formulate
ahead.
yours? One of the questions that's come up in the past was the cost of what we're doing for technology. And if you could, I know that as a result of this former question, you've gone out and looked at whether we offer in-house technology or technology provided by an outside firm. And the comparison, from what I learned in our conversations, was dramatically better by doing it in-house. Can anyone articulate that for us?
So I think there's two pieces to that, to answer that question. We have 3 technology staff that serve the entire town. So every computer that is town-owned is serviced by them. I think there's a couple exceptions on the town side.
Not the libraries.
Police get involved in some of the
Yeah.
police stuff, but they do other parts of it. The entire network is run by those 3 people. So what we did ask for a quote to replace those 3 people. The quote came back, and those 3 people cost, I believe, salaries are around $200,000 total for 3, or
Yeah, and benefits,
salaries
yeah.
and benefits. The quote we received back was $50,000 per month. So was their guess. When we were short, so about $600,000 to replace our $200,000. And that came with a caveat, because the pieces that they do where it's specific student software, student information software, companies don't like to get into that. They really don't want to deal with that, because it requires a person really to be sitting here, they can't take them and use them somewhere else. It's not, they just don't want to do it. So we did get a quote for that. I think the other piece of it, and I did look at the room before making the statement, is that, there are neighboring towns who the majority of the tech staff run about 6 figures in terms of salary figures. Ours aren't even close. None of them are close. We do very well. We get a lot out of the people we have. They've also maintained a stable. They've been stable for us, which in the tech world, if you hire tech people in your private life, it's not easy. It's not easy to figure out who really knows what they're talking about. It's also just very difficult to get them without paying significant amounts. So I think in the big picture, you get a lot of, pardon the expression, bang for your buck in our tech department, so.
Thank you.
If you don't mind me elaborating, we asked the department to review how many locations they serve, and they serve 9 locations, over 1,000 students, close to 300 staff members, over 200 software applications, over 147 phones, meaning network phones, 193 network devices, over 1,000 computers, and am I missing anything? And over 30 servers. So 3 guys are servicing all of that.
I would throw in there too that when we, I like to find ways to save money if we can without affecting services much. So 2 years ago, when we had the staff shortage and we had to use some outside people, we pinged that question too and said, well, what about these lower level? We have one basic tech, really great person we have in that place, but it's kind of, he does all the nuts and bolts pieces. So we asked the question, what would that cost just to replace that position? Could we have somebody who's just on call? After laughing at me the first time I asked, the second time they asked, they told me the $40,000 employee, the minimum they would come in at is about $80,000. They just could not, to pay people to run all over town like we do. It just cost them so much that they knew it would not be cost effective for them nor us. So.
And to dovetail on that, what you have highlighted in yellow, when we were down to tech and hiring contracted services, we had spent $20,000 more than we had budgeted, and we didn't expend it in wages, but half of this person's salary we expended in just a few short months for services.
Excellent, thank you. Tracy, did you?
Who is that?
What are you guys doing back there?
Why are yours on?
Must be the Russians.
Why are yours on? It's Ron. Unplug him. Okay, so now I'm looking at, the tech, this only goes back 1 year this year. Oops. Is it you?
Nobody's even
Right?
moving.
I know. Oh my
Is
God.
there a microphone that's in another room, perhaps?
Okay, so all right, first off, let me start at the top. So salaries is fine. Benefits, that's not just the department benefits.
6 people.
So the 166 for that group. All right, so this just sparked a question.
Where are you, Tracy?
On shared services, page 1,
Okay.
so you've got it all highlighted out as far as benefits and stuff. How come that doesn't show up anywhere else under other departments?
We don't allocate it by other departments, but for shared services, we do show the whole picture. I don't allocate it by department for benefits now.
So where is all that for?
There's a fringe benefits budget we'll look at later today.
Oh, all right. Okay. Okay. It's just weird because I've never, even in the Board of Ed, I've never seen it broken out like that.
Well, we feel it's very, very critical to show all the expense of shared services in one location and not to have their benefits out in the operating budgets.
Okay. This is an operating budget though, right?
It's a shared services budget, yes.
Okay. So that's why I'm confused then. If it's an operating budget and we get down to the town maintenance fund and the BOE maintenance fund, going back many moons with Paul and everything, when we're trying to figure this out, it was like, okay, so the grease catcher has to be, put that on a spreadsheet and how, drop it down, this is what needs to get done every year. Whatever it is,
A maintenance schedule.
paint the building, yeah, all that stuff. And then we decided, okay, it was gonna be X amount of dollars and it would stay you know, you put it in there and then it would get spent based on whatever the thing was. And of course, you know, the old thing, the boiler would break, so you'd throw 20 grand at it and all that. So for 16, 17, you appropriated, let's just start with the maintenance, the town fund, 75,000. I don't know what the amend change would be.
That would be the remaining funds from the prior year.
All right, and you spent, or no, you had 118 to spend, you spent 53, and the remaining funds was 64 and change.
Correct.
And then so then this year, you took another 75,000, amended, changed. We've only spent 48, so now there's 95 to spend.
Correct.
You know,
But
as you know, I'm not a public finance.
But
understand
to
it at all.
your question, in the last 3 years, the town's average has been almost 55,000 a year. And the maintenance fund has gone down, all the way down to 50, and then the board has put it back to 75 in prior years because the 50 was not enough. So the monies carry forward. They don't go away, but your question is, can you appropriate less?
Right, so 16, 17, you actually spent 53, February year to date, 44, I'm guessing it's because of this whole thing. So you're clearly gonna go over the 53. Same thing when you look at the Board of Ed.
But the Board of Ed's 3-year average has been almost 123,000. Well, you don't have that in front of you, but I do.
Okay, but it's already, like, it's, so if we're budgeting the right amount, how is there leftover, like, how is there leftover?
Because some years
Some
are
years it's
good and
less and
some are bad. And
All right.
and to speak to that, I mean, and Linda's in the back of the room with the town maintenance fund, we've had years that we've done very well, and we've had years that we've eked it out.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it was done also for level budgeting, so we're keeping our budget flat.
right,
And
okay.
obviously, if you want, it's your choice to reduce it.
My question about that is, does this new complex get considered into this shared service? Or is that on the Board of Selectmen?
No, this money is used for some planned maintenance, but mostly for unplanned needs. And that, I couldn't speak to what would potentially happen. I mean, it's certainly something you can visit. I almost think for this year, given that the budget's flat, if we could come back to you, that then when we're not managing the other buildings and we're in this building, especially for the town side, we'd have a better review for you and a better feel. Because it's kind of hard to say, we've been in here 30 days. 34, 35 days, something like that.
I just, so as an accounting thing, how do you get to keep money in a fund, in an operating account?
Think of, you have an animal control fund. We move money over, the money stays. Park and Rec, same thing.
But that's not, I'm still learning, and I apologize for, you know, being annoying.
No.
So doesn't that have to go to another kind of a fund? Like,
It is on there, Tracy, let me look at your.
it's under general, and it says shared services.
Correct. So it's
As long as it has its own little bucket.
its own little
Part of the general
bucket.
fund.
It doesn't go back to the general fund.
Okay.
For audit purposes, it gets reported there, but it doesn't go back, just to be clear. But it's a multi-year fund.
Okay.
So when you look at the town budget, if you go to the last page in section 2, you'll see a transfer to shared services. It's one number, and a transfer to animal control. So all of those different budgets, there's a transfer over to. And then they run in their own fund.
So, all right, so you're saying animal control has something over here too?
It's under special revenue funds, yes.
Okay.
And the balance of that that fund right now, can you give us an idea, is that on here?
Oh, shared services?
Yeah.
We right now in the current fiscal year, and this includes wages and benefits, at February, you show 641,000 remaining. That being said, just moving into this building, a lot under the town technology has been spent. We have a lot more new servers and things we've been planning for are coming in. And we're doing rather well on maintenance funds this year, but it's the spring, so I don't know what could be occurring. And it reflects a portion of wages and benefits. The town, and to be clear, what's in technology is not technology in a classroom as far as a French program or something. This is purely the network and any computers and administrative software. So it includes the accounting software, the student database, the cafeteria software, things of that. It's things to operate our facilities.
So just as I spoke with that earlier, is there any opportunity in this budget to help support our goal?
You certainly could look to reduce, in technology, you can't, I would say, because even though it shows a lot left over, I know what we've spent and we'll be paying bills coming up. And if you look, Board of Ed has 11,000 left of money for the year because we've paid all the bills pretty much. And the technology covers our internet, all that other thing. If you were to cut, you could look at maintenance funds. That's about it.
And can you explain, just so I'm clear, because that's the only one that I didn't get my arms around in the maintenance area. What is that, where is that? Tell me, is that looking at Grange Hall? I don't know, what is that looking at?
So, and please, Ron or Brian, jump in. The maintenance, one of the things the maintenance fund has held us off from doing is going back to town meeting constantly because something broke and it wasn't appropriated for. And it keeps us at a level funding. So we've got the good years, we've got the bad years, but it keeps our budget at a nice even keel.
And how much today is in that element of the shared services budget or revenue fund?
The full maintenance fund, we allocate 125 to the schools and 75 to the town each year. We have
Is there
about,
anything left over, is my question.
as of February, we had 200 left over. But I don't, and I was trying to get into Munis based on Tracy's question, and I can't get into Munis from here. I mean, if there was any area and I don't want to speak for Brian and Brian, but to me, for the town, the only area you really have is maintenance fund because the rest is salaries and benefits and technology that we're committed to paying lease payments and internet, et cetera, et cetera.
So let me, Ron, may I ask you a question about that? Are you seeing any, is that something that would be imprudent for us to consider if, given that we also have a contingency fund? But I just want to ask you, is cutting back anything, I'm not one that likes cutting back on maintenance, I think it needs to happen, but would that be hurting us if we scale that back? Is that a reasonable number given what you would be spending?
Well, one, or whatever you decide, but it's a nice insurance for us, we can't predict that this money's property, so
Are you finding a plus or minus any particular, is it, how did you derive the number that you're utilizing?
I inherited that number when I came in, but it's been a working number. If you don't know when an elevator is gonna need to be repacked, you're gonna have to spend $6,000 on maintenance. A lot of that flexibility, all the libraries, and anticipate that it's gonna be, that allows us to act quickly.
Okay.
And when Ron said the number of properties, this includes all town buildings, cemeteries, parks, schools, the two funds. So it's, how many structures is that?
22.
22, plus what, 13 cemeteries and parks, et cetera. It's every town-owned property. It's money to fall back on if something goes wrong.
All right, good. Question?
No, sir.
Question?
My only question was in regard to technology for both town and Board of Ed. Do we own computers or lease them? And if we own them, what's the refresh schedule?
So we have some that are owned, but the majority education side are leased, and the refresh schedule's on 3 years. We had looked at a 4-year or longer lease schedule, and the cost essentially was the same as the shorter, so we took the shorter.
Thank you.
And the town is a combination. We're moving more towards leasing as well. And we also look at if there's an ability, some computers aren't used as much, or people may not be power users, so we may hand down computers and recycle them down as well. But 3 to 5 years.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your services. Tracy, are you all set?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Board of Ed, for participating today. All right, so next on our lineup is Economic Development. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. We invited you to return because last Saturday there seemed to be a gap between your expectations and what we had seen on our budget, and so we wanted to just see where you stood today. To preface you, earlier on, we did, when I started talking, I did ask Emmett to see if you guys spoke and came to some agreement. He assured us you did, and he shared with us some of the general sketch of it, so you can fill in the color as you like, but we have an idea of where we think you're going.
Great. Do you have a copy of the proposed budget that's revised?
I believe we all
Does
do.
everybody have that?
We do.
Okay. I think basically, yes, I think after our last meeting, I'm Bob Kastner, I chair Economic Development. After our last meeting, we were a little farther apart on numbers. I think that what we're asking now is a little bit closer to what I think that your style of operating here, going around to the board members, is very helpful for someone like myself, because I get a little idea as to what the board is thinking, what the board members are thinking, and I like your procedure. It's very helpful from the standpoint of someone like myself who is going to be presenting something, to have a little idea as to what is positive, what's negative, and we can come back accordingly. So basically what we came up with was having the, we're going to call it a director's position. It used to be called basically a coordinator's position. We're going to be giving it more responsibility. It's going to have a little bit more work involved in it, but it will be a new position that will be out there. I think that we will be looking for this person. And I think what we learned a little bit on our last time that we had this position open, but I think we're going to be probably a lot more aggressive with trying to find monies out there. So we are asking that the 17-1, which is a 15-hour position at a $22 an hour, be funded. And then also the purchase professional services, which is a $24,000 item, we're asking, and that will basically give us the support money to make grant applications. When we're making these grant applications, we've got to basically show need, we've got to show what we're going to do with it, and we've got to show some kind of an idea as to whether we're doing landscaping, whether we're doing walkways. We have to basically draw up a plan and have some supporting documents to conclude with this grant. So what we're considering, and with your support, to do exactly what the chair offered, was to do this on a contractual basis and get it started. And see if we can't begin to turn this position into an income. We'd like to see this whole department as an income-producing position, and we think we can do it. And I think if you can support those line items, we can get started, and then basically we can be judged by our success or lack thereof to basically see if we want to have more money committed to this position or less money. But I think that will give us the seed money to get it rolling, and give basically the opportunity to show the community that we can bring in some grant money. And I think that the Economic Development Commission is the one to do it. I think we come back with a relationship with the community, with the business people out there. We're business people, and I think that we can relate with business people. I don't think taking some other staff members out of the building is exactly the people you want to use. And I think that we can, the people within the building can be great support for us. But I would like to have the opportunity to let EDC be the front runner on this and go after economic development grants.
Well, may I ask you a
Yep.
couple of questions, Bob?
Absolutely.
The first thing is, I think when you speak with the members of this board, you're gonna hear that we pretty much understand that monies allocated to EDC are investment dollars, they're not expense dollars. We get that. And we understand the point you're making about by investing these dollars, we can get a return. Last week you said tenfold. So we agree, because we really do need economic development. When we do the equation, the mill rate calculation, it includes building up the grand list. And if we can't build up that grand list, we're gonna just constantly be hitting our taxpayers with higher increases.
Absolutely.
We support that. The one feedback item I had, and it seems like you just addressed it a little bit, is at present, we do have a land use person and a town planner. And my question to you is there going to be some coordination between our new person and working in that existing one to try to maximize, if this money's allocated, to try to maximize the working relationship and almost develop a synergy, if you will?
Absolutely. I would venture to say that the economic development and the planning and zoning has a working relationship that is better than we have ever had.
I'm speaking specifically to the land use area and Jim Ventris in that department.
Yeah, well, there is, definitely. I mean, he comes with a world of knowledge. He comes with a world of basically opinions. But I think for that department to be, let's say, the promoter of it, you're also.
I'm just saying a collaboration. I just want to see some synergies happen. And in my view, I can make the justification of allocating revenues or investment toward that. But my concern is, I don't want to have competition. I want to have synergies. I want to see things, I want to see grants coming in. I want to see the best ideas coming. And we do have strengths in some of that area already, and maybe what we need to do is complement it. And maybe that person that you hire would be a complementer, maybe to work in that direction.
Absolutely, and we totally are going to work with basically the land use office. I think it's just that a zoning enforcement person and a wetlands enforcement person is not usually the person that, as the business person out there, I want them walking in my front door.
Got it.
That's never usually a good sign. And so I think if we can have somebody who is an economic development person or someone who is on staff of economic development, we will be more successful, because these things have to work together. We have to basically, if we're gonna put in a sidewalk, we have to make sure that the business owners want this, and where they want it, and how they want it. It's a lot of collaboration between the two. And I think we need to have someone who has got those kind of skills to make it agreeable with the landowners, the business owners, and I think EDC is the person to do that.
Very good. All right, I'm going to go through the board. Any question?
No, on the assumption that the Economic Development Commission has come to these numbers and feels comfortable with them, then I have no questions. I would not want to see us be saving a few bucks now, only to find out that if we only had hired 10 years from now, sitting here saying, oh my God, but if you're happy, no questions.
If I could just answer that question, I think we would far prefer to be able at this point to bring on a director who would have be in a $70,000 salary range. We're going to basically be hiring somebody who's a part-time person. The return on that investment is not going to be good as it would be if we could have what we really want and what we propose. But we also have to be realistic with what the chair is bringing out, that we can only raise just so much money from our taxpayers before we show a return to them. And I think we just had a meeting here, and we agreed that we would be willing to work with the Board of Selectmen, with the Board of Finance, to show them that we can do this. And at that point, if we're successful and we're showing an income, then I think everybody around the table here could feel more comfortable in allocating funds to do that. But if you can give us and make available to us these funds To answer your question, Harvey, we voted unanimously that we could go with this budget, and that we just hope the Board of Finance would stay open, that if we're successful, that we will come back, show what we're doing, and if we need additional backup money to basically make a better presentation, to make a better application for a grant, and that we think we could be successful, that you would just be open to that possibility.
Very good. Anything else? Tracy?
Thank you. I do think there needs to be somebody to do this work, especially in the light of, this building and the empty space over there. My concern is that we end up like we did the last couple of years, where there's, allocated monies and it doesn't get spent because of personnel issues or whatever happens. So I would appreciate that if you can't find the right person, or if you are interviewing and people are going, well, I can't do it half part-time, I need, if the people are out there and they're not willing to do it for what we've said we'll pay, I think we need to know that.
That was the situation at the last time
Right.
we went around. We had basically, I think, someone very qualified, but
Right.
we wouldn't be able to find it.
I understand that, but then I think you need to come back. You either need to come back to the Board of Selectmen, you need to come back to us and tell us that, and then decisions can be made at
And
that point.
my view on that, I agree, but I do want you to go to the Board of Selectmen, because we're the responsible financing
Right.
authority, but it really is the role of the Selectmen's group to make those decisions. So if you are having trouble with that, and that's the reason why I really wanted you to talk, rather than us to restore a dollar number to you, because I wanted to make sure you both agreed, because you have to work together.
I think that we.
To support Tracy, I
Yeah.
wanna say exactly, if you're having a lot of trouble with this, we agree that it's an investment. I don't think you're gonna see anyone here argue that point. Come back, make sure they know, if there's challenge, work back and forth, and then propose to us.
Okay.
Go on, Tracy, I'm sorry.
That's it, that's all, yeah.
Bruce?
I absolutely support this investment, and that's exactly what it is. It's a good start. It takes money to make money, in essence, so good luck.
Rick?
Yeah, my support as well. And again, as you gain traction and need more resources, go through the appropriate channels. Absolutely.
Will do.
Thank you.
And Mr. Gelston?
Yes, I support EDC, of course I do. It's positive for the town, but I got some detailed questions. Maybe I fell off the wagon here a while ago, but the regular employees, you're proposing hiring a part-time coordinator, is that the right term?
Correct, yes, 15 hours a week would be what would the 17-1 would support. We would, of course, like to do, and also we would like a little more wiggle room, but basically that's the proposal. That's what I think the Selectman's office has a comfort level with, and so we're basically willing to work with that, but basically we would like something else, but this is what we are willing to work with.
Let's just get started, like you said.
Yes.
Okay, now, and what's the primary occupation of that part-time employee? How are they gonna spend 90% of their time?
Basically supporting existing businesses, working with any new businesses that come in, and also doing some of the legwork. We're out doing some grant writing. That grant writer is gonna need information. They're gonna need backup support from the standpoint of engineering surveys, and that person will be responsible to get that backup information.
So one of the things that was talked about I think a week ago, it's been a long week, is Deep Rivers is very successful in getting grants, right? And that was done by the first selectman's office primarily. Doesn't have to be the case in East Haddam. I'm asking you, you're gonna follow the same path Deep River did, so we can enjoy those grants as well, become available?
Well, I think that it depends on the uses you want to put the grant to. Right now, we have environmental problems. And I would say that Haddam has been doing better with their environmental. They've been getting good grants to do basically the soil testing, and that's where we are. We've got several businesses, several properties that have severe problems as far as soil contamination is concerned. And some of them have been through phase 1, some of them have been through phase 2. But we need to get them through phase 3 so we can get basically a clean bill of health. Sometimes the town has to step in and help that along, and I think that we have some businesses that need to have that, a little bit of investment by the community to make that happen, and also just advice to make that happen. And I think that that's where we are right now. We want to help some of this property that is basically holding down our grand list because we can't get new it's not saleable, as we all know. Nobody's buying a piece of property that has contamination on it. And you can't finance it, you can't sell it, nobody wants it. And so when we have properties out there that are that way, we can't get them back on the grand list and start getting them producing, and they end up being an eyesore. And so we want to get rid of some of the eyesores that are out there and get them back on our tax rolls and basically get our grand list. That's as Bill brought out, we've got to work on this grand list because we've lost some big ones. I mean, the top 10, we're losing them and we're not getting them back. And I think that hopefully down in the center of East Haddam, we have that opportunity down there right now. I think if we can get the right contractor or the right investment group in there and get that thing on the tax rolls, there's one that could be on the top 10. And but it's not going to be done isolated. It's going to be done in cooperation with economic development. There's going to be a working relationship between whoever goes in there, and basically they're going to want infrastructure. They're going to want water. They're going to want sewers. They're going to want sidewalks. They're going to want us to address this thing. And I think that we're going to have to support whoever goes in there and basically help them with infrastructure.
So your part-time employee you're about to hire is going to be in the middle of all this?
Yeah.
In concert with the other personnel we have in the town, for example, land use.
Correct.
So I'll be hooked in together. That's great. The next question I have is purchase professional services. You're leaving the budget at $24K.
Correct.
And what do you envision these professional services are going to be for the next fiscal year?
In the past, we have used it to basically do landscape projects, to show sidewalks, to show lighting, to show something. We did that on the Four Corners area. That has become an area where there's numbers of people, and we need to have a little separation between traffic and people, and the sidewalks kind of do that. They give us a separation. And they basically also just kind of accent that there are some restrictions to where people go. And also it's beautification, to have some lighting around there. And it basically gives something between Skybark and being able to get over to Town Tavern. So you've got street traffic going on there. Wrestling Cats is right in the middle of it. So that's one area. We also looked at Lumberyard Road. It's a very difficult intersection, and we had an engineer looking at that. I think that that's definitely going to be on the table to complete that, but it's going to be in coordination with what goes on across the street. So I see basically those streetscapes in that area to work with whatever they do with the streetscapes on the town property. We're also going to continue that around the corner. We'd like to get it up to where the new access road would be going into the town property. We spent money in previous year's budget on the engineering to determine how we were going to get access into the town office property that would be approvable by DOT. We did actually get a letter from DOT. We had to do the engineering. We had to show the sight lines. You know, it was something where we spent about $5,000 to do that, but it proved that we could get access into it because they have basically said we can't use the old access right by the bridge and change the use of the property. So we had to come up with a new place to do it. There wasn't a lot of choices, but we basically proved to DOT where we could get the sight lines. And so we made that investment, but now when we go to sell the property or lease the property, we can show that we can get access that is approvable by DOT.
Thank you. So you've done a lot of engineering work already, just explained that, but primarily for the next fiscal year, this $24,000 we spent on contracting services
to basically dress up the town.
Dress up the town and also make the commercial intersections safer and basically work in coordination with who's ever going to be working on the town site. So I see a lot of it as being a good speed landing. And that's the area we're going to concentrate on. That's certainly the area that the first selectman has told us to work on. And I think that we're going to be concentrating on that area, but we need some funds available so as the contractor or investment group who purchases or leases that property, basically we've got something to work with so that we can say the community is going to work with whomever's going to go in there and obviously make an investment. Somebody's got to design this whole thing, and that's going to be in their court. But I think we need to show the support that we're willing as a community to support what they're going to do so that basically on both sides of the street, when you come across that bridge, you're going to say, wow, we're in a nice village, and make it so that it's going to coordinate and basically have a pleasing look when we come across that bridge. And I think that we're trying to make that village into something that we can all be very proud of. And also, it'll make it more demand for the commercial space that's there. And right now, we've got an excellent working relationship with the Goodspeed, nothing we've ever had before. And I'm very proud that I think Emmett and myself have had meetings with the Goodspeed director, and we've established a very good working relationship, and it's a total necessity. You can't do anything in Goodspeed Landing unless you've got the Goodspeed on board. And I think that Emmett and I have that now, that working relationship, and I think there's a lot of good energy out there, and I think there's some good potential of what we can do out there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You good?
I'm good.
All right, so before we, I'm gonna do two things. First is, I'm going to make a motion that we restore to the budget, the EDC budget that we were just presented, the revised number as of 3/20/18, the amount that the selectmen just recommended, right? That number you're looking at, it said 3/20/18 on the top of it, is that right?
First selectman, just to be clear.
What?
It
The
was
first selectman?
First selectman.
All right, I'm sorry. And recommend that we restore that number to the budget, and with an increased cost of, how much is that to the net, to the numbers that we're looking at?
Getting them for you right now. There would be additional $39,160 over what the Board of Selectmen had put forth.
So it's an additional 39,000 above what we had before. Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
We thank you for your support.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, what I'd like to do is, I've had you guys working 2 hours straight without a moment to recollect yourself, so I'm gonna take a brief recess. May I have a motion for a recess? I'm gonna reconvene at 11:15, if we will. I mean, is that right, 11? Yeah, 11:15. So, so moved. Okay, any second? Let's go.
Yeah, we're good.
Bob? You can-
Which one?
Sorry.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your hard work.
I'm just looking at the numbers, 17160.
Smoke 'em if you got 'em.
640.
This whole thing would work.
Was that me?
Okay, 0. I just
That's
want to
so
make
much
sure
more.
that you and I come up with this.
we're both coming up with the same bottom
That would be a good thing. So I just want to make sure, okay, so I have
Is
everything.
that the reason why that noise
Free
isn't going?
No,
Perfect.
somebody must have.
Very happy medium
I just want to make sure
between
we're on the same page.
last
It wouldn't be
year.
a bad thing.
Okay. What happened on your last Saturday's meeting is the fact that you let this keep running, it ran out of space. So we need.
Then we've got a chance to have
Okay, we're gonna reconvene our meeting, please.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
a lot of good can come from that.
Just to bring everybody back into perspective, there's a couple of things that we're discussing, and what I wanna do is I wanna share with you where we are today. So we voted on two things already about separating the 150 from the Board of Ed, look at later. We also were able to look at a reduction in cost from the Board of Ed of 50,000.
150.
150 when we add the 100 of medical benefits. And then, and I don't know that we did a motion, but I think it was, I think we already agreed that we're going to purchase the truck out of capital as opposed to putting in operating. So what I asked Cindy to do is, you know, we get this really cool mill rate calculator in our binder when we first start looking at it. But when we make substitutions and changes, we don't know what that means. So I thought I'd bring us up to date in current language with where we are. So for those of us that can see, okay, I have it on this front screen and it's also behind me for the public to see. So this is where we stand right now. Right now, if you look at the Board of Selectmen's recommended budget is the center column, it says BOS. And if you look at where we are today, given what we've discussed, we went from 52 down to 0.12, correct?
Correct, and I do have, because based on our discussions, there is 50,000 of using fund balance in that .12.
There's some support of fund balance in here.
Want me to zero that out?
Take the fund
for now?
balance out because we have to have that conversation,
Right.
so forgive me
'Cause
for.
you had me run some scenarios,
I
I
just wanted
hadn't
to see,
deleted that one,
see
so there were
what if
just correct.
scenarios.
For 0.18.
So now we've gotten that number down to 0.18. So we're well on our way toward that goal that we want to achieve. We've got to shave off just a little bit more.
And it seems that we have managed to get there without jeopardizing anything that is essential, or we haven't damaged ourselves to get there.
No considerable. Last year, you know, we were in a challenging time. We had to cut money toward capital, and so capital sometimes, you know, eventually can kind of bite you if you don't put that money in. That was restored in this year's budget. So I think we're, you know, and I have to credit our Board of Selectmen and our Board of Education for delivering to us a responsible budget. They really worked hard at giving us something that was workable, and it wasn't really difficult for us to make some of these changes. And we were blessed with some good luck. $100,000 savings in healthcare went a long way. So great, and the oil expense, Joe.
Does this adjusted Board of Finance number include the change that we just thought we would do with the EDC?
Yes, it does.
It does. Yeah, so I asked Cindy to take all the changes that we just did and implement them so we can see where we are in our running total. Now what I'd like to do is we're going to have, the way the schedule runs, we have Youth and Family Services at noon, and then we have an anticipated lunch break after they're completed. What I'd like to do is, I'd like to first highlight that we have a meeting scheduled for Tuesday where we're going to see public safety and fire, correct? Fire
Well, it'll be police and fire and ambulance.
All right. Who else is on that agenda for Tuesday?
That was Tony, and I moved Tony to today.
Okay.
But you may want to look at police, fire, and ambulance, and you may decide you don't need to see them, so.
So my thought question is, before we do that, I want you to look at the budget areas to review as time allows. And let me, so on my agenda item, we're gonna kind of move times allows. It's giving us the opportunity to approach these areas. I want you to look at each one of these items and tell me if you think we need some additional information on it. Now, I will tell you that one of our members brought up to me about the capital budget for the Petticoat Lane project and the concern of maybe that is not properly budgeted. So we may want to go back and talk to Beth about if, and by saying properly budgeted, worried that maybe not enough monies were allocated toward the cost of completing that project. So we may want to invite her back to speak on that, and that would mean a meeting on Tuesday. That's the only one that I've gotten, but my intent now is to go around and just ask each one of you, is there any question of any of the other boards that we didn't cover so far that you want to get into that we might have missed? And Cindy, did we miss anything that I'm missing?
You haven't done page by page, but we brought in some key groups. So if there was anything you wanted to hone in on that, of a group that hasn't been here, or anything that relates to budgets prepared by the selectmen.
So,
And
look through this list and take a moment, look through it. You can maybe go through your book, and if there's any here that you wanna cover, we could just go, through them real quickly, or we can invite them to present to us on Tuesday. They're not here, obviously.
Well, people are staring. Can I just do, so we went from 31,847 to 31,552. Can we just do like a running total of what we did? Do you have?
It's 250,000 Board of Ed, 150 of it was the security, 100 was the savings.
Okay, hold on.
Of benefits and, fuel.
31. Okay.
And then a $50,000 reduction, so Board of Ed on total is 100, 150, and 50, so
Do you
300.
have the breakout of benefits and oil?
Should be 540.
Not with me.
Okay, so.
Just to let you know, we had
Benefits
budgeted
and
oil at like
1 minus
220 something, and we came in, what did we lock at, 203, I think.
I'm sorry.
Really?
Oh, I see, that's because it's millions.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so 150 for security, 100 for benefits and oil, however those two go together.
And 50 reduction,
Oh, the 50 reduction, I forgot about that. Okay.
34,000 for the truck. And then you increased EDC.
So the EDC is an offset against these savings that
Right.
we have.
I will provide you with a summary sheet on Tuesday.
I forgot the 50,000 on the thing, okay, I couldn't get my math to work. So plus 39 something. Okay.
Any other questions? Any of these other, budget areas that you want to review today or, in particular? We did cover shared services, but any of the other ones you want to discuss?
Honestly, I haven't really looked at
Harvey, how about yourself?
I guess if we could, see if we can look at public safety, and maybe they don't have to sacrifice a Tuesday evening.
Okay, that's great.
So if you start on page public safety.
You know what I'd like to do, Cindy? I'd like to just query the board,
Okay.
and then we'll decide which one. Any other ones? Harvey?
No,
Okay.
no, I'm sorry, I'm happy.
Bruce?
Nothing specific, no.
Yeah, just police, fire, and ambulance, fine with me.
Todd, any other specific ones you'd like to highlight in more detail?
Yes, well, first, Public Works, I asked the question about Petticoat Lane.
Public Works, yes, that's a follow-up.
And also, I also want to ask her about repairs and maintenance. I want to understand.
Just give me on this section
Public safety
here,
and Public Works.
those are the two you wanna have more conversation.
Yes,
All right. Anything else?
thank you, that's all.
That's it? Okay, good. And feel free, if you come up with something else, we'll look at it, but as we stand now, these are pretty simple, basic budgets, and we've had the key people visit with us, and if you wanna delve in deeper, we can, but for the time being, we'll go there. With that said, Public Works is not present today, so we're gonna have to get a response to that. We'll talk about that before we finish. Let's talk about public safety, so let's open up that section of the budget.
Section 2, starting the, page 67 is the narrative for ambulance. It's merely in there as a reminder that we do support ambulance. You don't need to go to section 6, but the ambulance, there is $200,000 budgeted for an ambulance, and there's reserves for it. And I know there's been some confusion with the ambulance board and other people. They don't need an ambulance in next fiscal year, but in order for them to start bidding it out and getting ready for it for the following year, it really needs to be in next year's budget, because they can't be bidding equipment that's not appropriated. So as part of our agreement with them, we would fund an ambulance for them. So that's no budgetary impact.
There's no operating budget for them? They all.
No, we just do capital.
Okay.
They're not a town organization.
Okay.
Part of the incentive plan for mutual aid is the ambulance, and we reserve for it each year. And last year, in accordance with their contract with us, they did return $40,000 to the town, which will go into their reserves in accordance with the agreement.
And for my benefit, getting to Tracy's question about operating, remind me where we are today with that deal that we had with the, was it Middlesex Hospital?
It's holding flat at the $9,126. You'll see that coming up.
Okay, continue then.
You've done building department.
Yep.
Emergency management numbers are pages 74 and 75. And Craig was not able to be here today. He would have liked to have been. The only changes are to wages and to communications is our Valley Shore 911. But please look at the narrative on page 73. This is going to be the last year of our original agreement with Valley Shore, so you could see some major impact with that down the road. So just to keep that on your radar.
Okay.
Next up is fire department. And the Board of Fire Commissioners has made a proposal, and you have a commissioner here. You want to do that, Bruce or Emmett?
Go ahead, Bob.
To which?
To
Full-
go to
full-time?
the two full-timers
Okay.
versus.
They would recommend that we go back to the system that we had, God, what is that, Bruce? 8 or 9 years ago?
I'd say.
Something like that. And what we had was 2 full-time members of the paid staff. They would have to be supplemented with some part-timers because there's time off for vacation and whatnot, and we're gonna need coverage. But at the moment, we have, what, 6 people on that?
5 or 6, yeah.
And there's a great deal of confusion and questions about just how it's operating. And the feeling is that it'd be far better with 2 full-time paid staff. And we should note at that point that Wick, who has been our full-time paid staff, has given his notice effective April 1st. So he will no longer be with us. So we'll be actually hiring 2 people at that point. The fire department has come up with a mechanism by which we can interview and recommend, which involves other towns, other professionals within the fire departments there. And we're looking at that and considering it. But the feeling is that we really need to get back to that system. It worked better and it'd be less expensive for us in the long run. One of the things I did do, and is alluded to before, there's been a lot of confusion over the last year, and I'd come down and be under the impression that for the ambulance, on the first tone, people were going. And then discover they weren't. And a variety of reasons, a variety of things, they're going back and talking to members of the ambulance and the ambulance board, and talking to the fire department, paid people, never quite figure out what was going on, but it seemed like they were supposed to be going, but they weren't. So I instructed Ray to put together a letter, went back, and Dean Anderson had put out a letter in 2012 alluding to how you responded. And that seemed to have fallen by the wayside. So I said, I want that letter reformatted and put out again so it's real clear that we don't have people out there when the tone goes off, when the first call goes out from Valley Shore, that there's an emergency, that people are waiting around to see what happens. And the confusion that seemed to develop was with the ambulance staff who do get a stipend. And there was some concern that, well, we've got to get in there and get our pay, get paid for what we're doing. And a hesitancy on the part of the paid staff to go out and get in the way. And we had to resolve that sort of a question. And the instruction right now says when you got a tone, you go. And we'll sort the rest of it out after the fact. If it's a BLS, depending, it may be handled one way. That's a basic life support, which is a less urgent need. If it's an ALS, you're on your way instantly to respond to that call. And watching, and I see them all on the phone here, it is working. It's happening now. And one of the portions of that is the paid staff is alerting Valley Shore and alerting everyone to the fact that they're actually gone and that they're actually going to a hospital which ordinarily means that we're not staffed down at the fire department. So people are aware of the fact that we need a little bit more attention to what goes on down there, if there's another call that comes in. And we have seen multiple calls coming in, one on top of the other, heart attacks and strokes, one after the other. It's been a tough winter, but we seem to be responding much better now than we were before.
Great. Anything else you want to add to that?
I was just gonna say, this is a financial savings and an enhanced response. We're gonna get,
So it's a double.
Good combination.
right, and people just, when you need an ambulance, you need an ambulance. You can't be waiting. So hopefully this will improve that response and keep coverage in town with 2 full-time. If one full-time has to leave town with the ambulance, the other full-time would remain back. The ambulance would be responding presumably with ambulance personnel, whether they be even a volunteer fireman that's been cross-trained. There's a lot of that going on now, which is enhancing our ability to respond more quickly. So I think it's a good idea.
Great. I have a question. Did fire department come up with a false alarm
That would,
assessment?
I spoke with the chief today, Saturday, Thursday or Friday, with regard to he's reaching out to other towns to find out what they do for false alarms, and that goes all the way back to, I think you're the one, Greg, that brought it up at that November meeting. So yes, they're researching it. That would probably be the only thing you'd want to have discussed with them, but they know that the Board of Finance would like to explore implementing a false alarm ordinance
Any
policy.
idea? I mean, I have no idea. Is this something that is, you know, we're talking about a couple $1,000s, or is this real money in our budget process?
I think it's only a few $1,000s, but on the other side of the coin, if you can reduce false alarms, it stops other volunteers and our equipment and everything from going out when it's in the wear and tear, and so we'd have a benefit on the other side.
So implementing this isn't something that you're estimating, given the number of, you're probably the resident expert of our board. We don't get enough that it's going to be substantially concerning us in our budget process today, but by implementing it, we'll see the benefit down the road, sort of like what we discussed with the building department by raising.
Right, it's not gonna be a money maker, it's gonna be an incentive for folks to fix their equipment, keep us off the road, keep our costs down, keep our exposure to potential
So it's good,
accidents.
it's
what
good
have
policy, but we don't really need to spend a lot of time going
you.
into the
That's the way I
details.
view it, yes.
Anybody want to ask any questions based on that specifically? Harvey, Tracy?
Yeah, just to clarify, so this budget, so currently we have, where am I? 1 full-time and 2 part-times? No.
Several part-time
About 4 or
positions.
5,
Oh, all right, and now we're looking to move to 2 full-times
2 full-timers.
and keep all the part-timers?
Well, it's probably at least a few in reserve.
Not
Enough for coverage.
And not in hours. We built in, when I met with the fire chief and Emmett, we built in enough time for part-timers for vacation and illness and things of that nature. So the wages in there are not just straight to full-time firefighters. There's built in for substitutes, if you will, for lack of a better word, for additional coverage.
Okay, so the part-time people will just be, they won't just be used as much?
No.
Something to that effect, yeah.
Okay, all right. And I'm just gonna put this out there. If there's a call and these people are in there playing rock, paper, scissors about who's gonna take the call, that's unacceptable. At any cost, I don't care, that's just wrong. Period.
No one disagrees with that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of what we're doing.
Yeah,
Anything else,
okay.
Tracy?
Nope, I think we're good.
Said.
Yeah, the comments about the false alarms are great, right? You want to reduce the times your equipment goes out, and every time your services go out, they're not available somewhere else. That's the other piece, and that's a big safety issue. So, I hope that work gets done. The other piece was some departments are also discharging during motor vehicle accidents, they're submitting bills to insurance companies to cover a portion of the response. So there could potentially be thousands of dollars there as well.
That's weird.
Do they submit for bills? Do you know if they submit?
I do not believe they do.
Okay.
So
So we can ask them that question.
there's a
How did-
potential.
I don't know what the ambulance submits for, but I don't think the fire department bills, like, I don't think they bill CLMP when they're at something like that.
Maybe for the revenue subcommittee, that would be a good opportunity to chat with either fire commissioners or the fire chief to see what opportunities are there.
Great
No-
idea.
no other
Keep popping
questions?
those out. You get one idea, and then another one shows up. I love it.
I brought that one up months ago, so apparently wasn't
That was
recorded
during
or
the month.
remembered.
We-
But,
yeah,
but there's real money in that one that can
That
offset.
sounds good.
There are services available that will manage that for you at, of course, taking a percentage of which, what the town would receive, but there are opportunities there.
Anything else?
No.
And Todd?
I have a few questions. First of all, I'll make a comment. I'm a little confused. So I'm gonna talk about ambulance first, and then fire department. Ambulance. We have our own ambulance support here, own ambulances, own crew. And the drivers of that ambulance are both full-time and part-time, depending on need and availability, right?
Yeah.
So if our ambulance is busy, how many ambulances do we have? If I make a call right now for ambulance, how many ambulances are available in town right now for come respond to my call? 2. Okay. Well, my wife had a bad experience recently with a friend of ours who had a medical emergency, very clear emergency. And she called 911, ambulance was sent out. But it was sent out from Deep River, or Haddam, I guess it was Haddam.
Mutual aid.
They got lost in East Haddam. It took an hour and a half or more than an hour for them to get to my wife and her friend who was in dire need. Well, that's a manageable problem with Board of Finance, that's management. But the question I'm asking, if our ambulance is not available and we call an Haddam ambulance comes or Deep River ambulance, do we pay for that service?
The town?
Yeah.
No.
No.
So we're all in this big network together, and we help out Haddam, no charge. Haddam helps out us, no charge, okay. Then it's just a matter of management, making sure people know where to get to in East Haddam, because they're not familiar with East Haddam roads. Neither was the dispatcher, turns out. Okay, that's good. And the second thing is now fire department. I understand there's an initiative by the fire department to diminish the participation of the part-time firemen and maximize full-time firemen. Now, I'm interested in a cost-benefit analysis. Today, we have 2 full-timers?
One, just one.
Just one full-timer, and that's the guy who quit recently, so now we got nobody basically by the April 1st. Okay, 1 full-timer and 4 or 5 or 6 part-timers. Okay, it's a total manpower of, say, 7 people, I'll say 5 or 6 people, 5 plus 1 is 6.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 6 firemen available for a call.
No, at the same
No.
time, not the paid guys, not at the same time.
Okay, that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
So the full-time guy, he doesn't work 24/7, I assume.
No.
So the rest of the time is covered by the part-timers? Is that a fair statement?
And the volunteers.
Volunteers.
And volunteers?
But they're not all scheduled on the same day.
Okay. So is there any period during the week, 24/7, where there is neither a full-time or part-time fireman available?
Yes.
Plenty.
There's plenty.
Lots.
So the volunteers have to come in at that point, right? So that's interesting. All right, now, what is the total cost of the 1 full-time and 5 part-time? What's our total cost for the year for?
At this point, And I'll just answer on a numbers basis. Right now, we're supplementing of one full-timer with 70 hours of part-timers. And the fire department,
You say full-time is 40 hours?
plus another 70 in part-timers roughly.
42 and a half.
Right, and the Board of Fire Commissioners believes they can do it for 80 hours a week, not for 110 hours a week, number one.
So, 80 hours, that's
240.
two full-time is 80 hours.
And they do work more than 40, I think it's 42 or 40. The fire department has different hours.
Three, I
But
think.
for the basic, the other cost is, what word am I looking for?
Equipment.
Equipment, gearing so many people is each firefighter is like $6,000 plus to outfit.
Plus training.
Well, if you're hired and paid, but yeah, you have to keep up with it.
So, okay, well, that's my concern. Right now, we got 110 hours of coverage between the part-timers and full-timers. And if we diminish, well, I thought the part-timers were gonna go away completely, something they're not. But, so with the two full-timers, we're gonna get 80 hours of coverage. But the part-timers are still gonna be involved.
To fill shifts.
Okay, so are we gonna maintain the 110 hours of coverage? Or not?
No, you'll have your volunteers covering the difference.
So you're comfortable with volunteers covering that difference?
But, don't forget, the layer is you have, calling them paid firefighters, that's not what they do most of the time. They're EMTs. Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong. So you have your layer of these guys, and then you have people that work for East Haddam Ambulance Association, who are also go out on these calls.
Maybe a little history's in order there. We had a volunteer ambulance service, 100%,
Yes, I remember those days.
10 or 15 years ago. And we had a volunteer fire department 10 or
Yes.
15 years ago. And over time, the town has changed. The availability of people working within the town or retired or whatever was diminished considerably. And we found that during the day, it became very difficult to field a crew, be it fire or be it ambulance.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that 2/3, if not 3/4 of your calls are ambulance. So the fire side of things is a lesser portion of it.
Thank goodness.
And back under Brad, ages ago, we started to initiate this idea that maybe we needed to put some paid staff on, hire some guys to just fill in during the week, that hollow in the middle of the day. And over time, we ended up with 2 people, and they were trained as EMTs and as firefighters. And that was a requirement, that they be able to do both. And they would be going out on the calls, and as I mentioned before, there was some confusion about when they were going, particularly with the ambulance. And if there were ambulance people, volunteers available, they had priority. But then the question becomes, well, were there any available or not? When do we go? And that's what the recent letter was trying to resolve. It's something that's grown and become a bigger problem over time. The circumstances recently, which were particularly difficult for us, and the question of the early morning hours were always there with the ambulance. And what happens when you wake up and your partner's laying there and needs an ambulance now? And so how do you shift your hours? And that's going to remain a question. How do we arrange the hours to try to get coverage early? And one of the answers was trying to shift the hours earlier and earlier, and we suddenly found ourselves with our full-time paid employee working 4 days a week, coming in very early, and managing to get the 42.5 hours, which is what it actually is, done in 4 days. Well, now we find ourselves with 4 shifts covered, and we've got 6 shifts that we have to cover. That adds hours. The contract calls from 7 to 3:30 is the working hours for the full-time paid. We felt that moving it up earlier was important, and somehow or other it morphed into this. Contract was never changed. So that's where we stand right now. In addition, we would have a second person. Initially, it was 2 full-time paid, and then the thought was we might be able to get more bang for our buck. If we went to part-timers, we didn't have to pay benefits, and that's where we ended up. To be honest, it hasn't been working well. And that's one of the things we're going to be discussing on Tuesday. Just where are we going and why and what's happening.
When you say Tuesday, you mean with your group?
This coming Tuesday, this meeting that we spoke of earlier.
Well, they weren't here.
Well, I'm sorry, that was during the selectmen's meeting.
It's all
merging.
blurred now.
This has all been
All
one
right,
long
so,
one.
so what I wanna kind of focus on is, with this recommendation, we're
Yeah.
estimating some cost savings today and improvement of services.
We're looking to get back to the original structure, and at least that's the thought, with 2 full-timers, and there's probably 40 hours or 40 days a year that you're not gonna have people because of vacation time, and full-timers are entitled to all the benefits. So now you need coverage on those. You don't wanna have,
And that's where the
blank
part-time
spots. And that's where
volunteers-
the current part-timers will still remain to some extent in play, and they'll be coming in to fill in. But all you have is 2 people on duty at any given time, and it's during the day that you have them.
But the 2 people on duty at the same time?
Yeah, and there's some questions. How do you stack up that, and amounts to 8.5 hours per day? Do you have someone coming in at 6 and the second person coming in at 7? And then you've got a little bit of a tail on the other end, and you depend on the volunteers to come in and fill. Just how do you schedule it? That's a problem that they're gonna have to resolve. And that issue about people early in the morning needing an ambulance is kind of what you want to address. How do you offer service in the best possible way to the people?
Yeah.
Any other questions, Todd?
What I was trying to get down to is, I'm a big guy for provide services. As long as we can afford to pay for it, it makes sense financially.
Yeah.
So now I understand the service. Now I'm gonna ask the question. Right now, today, we have 40 hours of 1 full-time fireman, 70 hours of 5 part-time firemen, total 110 hours of coverage per week. How much is that costing us?
Budget
Including equipment, including,
If you look at the budget sheet at the top, if you have a line item, the section for career firefighters. So the career firefighters in the current budget year is $134,000. And the proposal is for 116.
okay, but with 116, we're getting 80 hours of full-time help, but the rest is being filled by the volunteers. Plus, I'm hearing the part-timers are hanging around. I'm a little confused about what the part-timers' future is here.
That's what they'll be discussing Tuesday on how to structure
It's
it.
not settled yet.
Just how it's gonna look when we're finished. One of the things to note on it is that the fire department has been quite successful in recruiting volunteers. And there may be a little more coverage than there was at one time from the volunteers. So that's a part of the formula.
Yeah, you can't, volunteers are priceless
Yeah.
in any organization. I think I better understand now.
All right, good.
Thank you.
And one last thing for fire department, you don't necessarily need to go to page section 6, but their capital continues with the replacement of the air packs. And it's an annual cost of $30,000. At one point, that we were looking at, for members that have been on the board a long time, replacing everything at once, which is like $120,000. So now it's been spread out and there's a refresh every year.
Good. Want to continue on with that? Let me just give us a pause. We'll continue on with this conversation till noon, and then we're going to switch over to you.
Tony. If you go to pages 83 and 84 is paramedic, like you asked about. And that's unchanged.
So what is this? This is different than ambulance and different than fire?
This is Middlesex Hospital's assessment.
Oh, they charge us?
Yes.
Okay. Right, okay.
And pages 86 and 87 is East Haddam Police. The only increase is budget wages.
Cindy, we had, on the revenue committee, discussed maybe raising the cost that we charge to utilities and the like. Has any of that been considered in?
We need to sit down and talk with the officers, et cetera, but we can, and not that they have necessarily say in the admin fee. We've just greatly raised our private duty rates to make them more competitive, but we have the opportunity to look at what we pay in administrative costs. And for your revenue committee, I'm starting to pull private duty contracts from other towns to give you guys a comparison.
So how long ago did you say you told me that the other day? You
July,
raised?
the rates went up when they were done negotiating the contract, I think December 1st.
Okay, so that's been looked at. All right, good. Keep going. Any questions on, stop, we'll just move along until we get somebody has a question, you could just, if you would, just interrupt and we'll just continue. You have a question on this section?
On police officer, does this include resident state troopers?
No, next page. Next,
How about before? Did you have a question, Tracy?
I just was wondering about overtime, but it's included,
yeah.
so we don't know what percentage of that, or, most of these are part-time, or are these?
We have 4 full-time,
4 full-time.
3 part-time, and overtime is based on about 30,000 a year.
Why is it included? Because normally it's pulled out as separate.
In all honesty, when we converted the accounting system, it rolled it all up, and I will be pulling it back out for July 1 and recording it separately, so we can talk about that next year, because we don't like it that way. But it got merged in, and I haven't pulled it back apart.
Okay.
Then resident state trooper, in the current fiscal year, we budgeted at 100%. And we didn't get assessed the 100%, so that's why it's gone down roughly 5,000, because last year we had no idea what they were gonna do to us on state trooper when the budget was put together. So there's a decrease in that. And when we talk this year's forecast later, this has helped this year's forecast a little.
Any questions on resident? Tracy? Todd?
Yes, the resident state trooper says salaries. That include benefits?
That's our allocation of everything from the trooper. We get allocated his car, his benefit, everything.
That's the cost of the man in the car. Okay, the police officers, does that include benefits as well?
No. That's a benefits budget.
Different budget. Thank you.
Great.
Most police officers.
No questions?
Because they're retired state troopers. And
And
it's
for police, the capital, they requested a full cruiser, and the selectmen said they would split the baby in half and save for half this year and half next year. The cruisers are pretty low mileage, and that was something they felt they could push out. Want to know what page is Youth and Family Services?
capital.
If I can find it, Tony? No. Youth and Family Services is
Running for
section
this
2,
board.
starting page
Well, it's
115.
done with being town clerk. I am running for this.
I can show you what they're looking at.
I don't know that I want to be done yet.
Wherever you want to be.
I'm gonna stay for 20 years.
Okay, so this is what they were submitted to you.
Yep, and their narratives.
Okay, did they get a copy of this?
I had not given them a copy of that yet. I have copies made if they want.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, hi guys.
Hi, Tony.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
So if you like, you can give us a brief introduction, have any items, and then we'll go through the board and ask any questions.
Okay, not too much of a change in the budget request that we submitted. We saw we're able to do a little bit of a decrease in our, a little bit of increase in our salary as a result of we had some rehires, that we had to do. We lost 2 personnel, we had to bring a couple of people in. We also increased our content hours to full-time. For the first time, we've been able to do that. That's based on need. We've had some referrals that we've been running a waiting list. The reason that it's not a more significant increase actually than this is because when we hired new people, we were able to bring them in at a lower salary. So we were able to compensate some of the increase with the increased counseling hours by lowering the salary rate for the youth coordinator position that came in. Other things are pretty much the same. Any increase that you see is based on increasing cost. office management, that includes rental of equipment, supplies, all of the things that we use to keep the office running. The other increase you see is we've gone from 0 to 1,200 under counseling supervision, contracted services. That's because up to this year, we had a relationship with Haddam Youth Services, who were providing group supervision to a number of youth service agencies in Middlesex County. The person who was doing that left their position, moved out of state. That was no longer available to us. We have to provide supervision to our counselor coming in. So what we're doing is paying $100 a month for his supervision. He takes up the rest of the cost of the supervision. So coming in, what I think a little bit of a 1% increase. The increase in services that you see is because there's an increase in need
Very good.
throughout the town.
Questions, Harvey?
No, I don't have one.
Tracy?
Again, newbie question. It says Youth and Family Services is not a town department.
Right.
Yet you get funding from the town. So what is the relationship and how does that work?
Well, we essentially request, I guess it comes in the form of a grant from the town. We contract with, or the town contracts with us to provide a variety of services, actually. We provide social services in the town. We provide youth development programs, counseling programs for the town and the school district. We oversee the local prevention council, where we applied for and received a grant in the amount of $125,000 a year times 10 years. We actually applied for that grant and oversee that work. We also oversee Project Grad, Food Bank, Clothing Bank. So the town contracts with us to do all of those things.
In many towns, they have a full department that they fund the whole thing for.
So what's the difference?
A lot less money for the service.
How? If she's doing everything that we need, but we call it a grant, what's it? It's just, I don't understand.
Well, it's because we're a private nonprofit corporation, I think.
Oh, so you get to run as a nonprofit? Okay. Okay.
They do fundraising and seek donations, and there's pass-through grants from the town, down from the state.
Okay. That's the key right there. Okay. Got it.
Anything else, Tracy?
No, I think so.
Nothing?
Good morning, or good afternoon, Tony. You mentioned a wait for counseling?
So up to this point, we provide the counselor, we have one counselor at the
Okay.
agency. Up to this year, that counselor has been a part-time person. We started at 10 hours a week, we were able
Okay.
to expand over time to 20 hours a week, but think about that service being the only counseling service provided to the district
Right.
and to the community, other than private services. That's a service that's available to folks who
Sure.
can't. So we have chronically had a waiting list. We have chronically had folks who have called and said, I want to see somebody, and we have said, well, we're not available now. We make referrals to other groups or organizations, or they wait and they come in when we can get them in. We probably, to be honest, will even see a waiting list with this, because now we're looking at 32 hours a week still for that same population. So it's a large population.
Right.
For 32 hours a week of counseling. But that's the waiting list, that explains the waiting list.
So if you were to come to us, I mean, what would you need to reduce that or eliminate that, right? I mean, counseling is important.
It is important, and I think truly over time, if we're going to, as a community, as a town, we're gonna look at providing more than adequate services, more than the kind of baseline services that we're able to provide at this point. We're looking at a counseling department. We're probably looking at 2 or 3 counselors or more who are able to provide those kinds of services. But clearly, we're not at a point where the community can do that, provide that kind of service. Part of what we did when we had, one of the things you'll see, one of our higher ticket items is our restaurant contract. We provide drug and alcohol services specifically to the schools, middle school and high school, through that contract. So we try to tack on services where we can. There's a greater need than we're able to fill in our community. And that's in a number of areas. I mean, that's certainly in the area of counseling. It's also in the area of social services. Right now, I provide the social services for that piece. I'm also the director of the agency, so clearly, something has to give. So I think we're applying Band-Aids to the social services in our community. We're kind of fixing immediate issues, and we're not addressing larger issues around the intergenerational entrenched poverty that exists in little pockets in our community. But again, we don't have the money to do that, so we provide the services that we can at this point. We're also in a position, the youth service agencies we're kind of in a tough spot at this point, that the state, in its infinite wisdom, has, they're talking about cutting the state budget to us again. It's a meager budget, it's $19,000 a year. It was cut slightly this year. The word is it's on the chopping block, or at least it's being looked at again for next year. And they also have recently decided that the youth service agencies are going to pick up all of the truancy cases in the state, because the courts are now saying we're not dealing with truancy cases, and that's an unfunded mandate. So that's something I'm doing as well, is picking up all of those truancy cases that come through our system. Now, so far, our district hasn't had a lot of truancy cases. At the moment, we have one with two kind of pending. But so the trend is, let's get the youth service agencies involved in doing these things, but the funding coming from the state to provide those services isn't there. So, and again, we do what we can with minimal resources.
So I think our responsibility to the people of the town might be to continue to work with the, the Board of Ed, right? We were talking about the $150,000 that we put off this morning, or shifted this morning. I see this in conjunction with youth safety, right? And I think the senior center there. So I think there's a lot of work to be done here to help the community.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I do respect and recognize the position that the towns have been put in, the state budgets being what they are. So I think it's a long-term proposition that we're looking at, but I think those conversations are probably important and would be helpful. I agree.
Thank you. Nothing else?
Todd?
Yes, I have a few questions. First and foremost, how many recipients of your services in East Haddam last year?
It varies based on what we're doing. So, and I'm going to throw numbers at you that are off the top of my head at this point. I don't remember the exact numbers. In the social services area, I probably serviced 25 to 30 clients last year. Those phone calls were typically, I can't pay my rent, I can't pay my electric bill, I don't have food, I don't have oil, I can't send my kids, I don't have stuff to buy my kids for school. Those are the kinds of things we're dealing with. Probably 25 to 30 of those cases last year, and that's pretty consistent over time. Our counseling program, right now, I can tell you that he is seeing, now he started the end of February. He's about 3 weeks in. He has 14 cases from the schools and 2 cases from the community. So already he's halfway there in terms of filling the hours that he has in a month's time. Last year we probably serviced in our counseling program. At that time, she was working 20 hours a week. We probably serviced about 40 kids in a year's time. Our youth coordinator service, we have a number of youth programs. That's a hard number to tell you, because we have large group programs, small group programs. I mean, basically, that's a community-based thing. We have youth programs in both the middle school and the high school. We run programs throughout the year, activity programs. We run a couple of large community events every year. So that's a tough number to give you. It's intended to reach the community. JRB, which is our Juvenile Review Board, which we also run, is a diversionary program that keeps first-time offenders, youth offenders out of the judicial system. We had 14 cases last year. That didn't include the truancy cases that we're picking up now. And so that's the agency in terms of direct services from the agency. And we oversee the work of the clothing bank, food bank, Project Rad, and the big chunk is the local prevention council, which that's the group that's funded by the federal grant. And they provide services. The federal grant requires community-based environmental services, so that's what they do. That's community.
How many, I was told, maybe the language is wrong, but you run the food bank? Manage it?
No, we oversee the food bank.
Oversee.
We have volunteer managers, 2 folks, who actually run the day-to-day operation of the food bank. They handle the inventory, they handle the clients, on and on and on. I support that, oversee that. So we provide administrative support to that. I meet with them. If they run into a problem, they call me, I go. We meet on a monthly basis to just kind of see what's going on, how do we make changes, how do we improve, that kind of stuff. So my role is purely in a oversight role. So I don't run it, thank God.
Do you know how many people use the food bank each week, each month in East Haddam?
80-some people, individuals and families, 80-some people per month.
Wow. I heard it was well used. Wow.
I think that's a low number. It is well used. I think there are more folks out there who don't use the food bank either. You know, it's a small town, so folks get embarrassed about that, so they don't want to go, or they, it's a tough town transportation-wise, so they can't get there. That's a low number.
Okay. Now, thank you very much. Now I have some detailed financial questions.
Oh, God, I can never answer these well.
Well,
Go ahead.
under expenditures, I see mortgage,
Yep,
$1,500 for mortgage.
yep,
I don't quite understand. You're a nonprofit,
yep,
providing service for the town.
yep.
How does mortgage fit in?
Because we have a little house that we work out of.
And that house is
It's in
owned
our
by?
little house, I think.
I've been to your house a couple of
You've been
times.
to our little house, yeah.
Yes. I used your parking lot more than a couple of times.
They own that.
They own the building because
We
they're
own
an
that
entity.
building.
Not a town agency.
That building was purchased like in the early 1990s by the folks who were establishing the agency. And
So you own it, but the town pays you to own it.
Well, we did we give an annual grant.
Well, yeah, under
We give an
mortgage.
annual grant and they utilize that
we
money
utilize
to,
that to pay our mortgage.
So if you look at
part of it.
Essentially, we use the grant from the town to cover our operational expenses, all of our operational expenses.
Oh, so we really don't pay a mortgage. We don't
No,
pay.
so this is their budget. So if you look at the top tide, you'll see their sources of income are the town of East Haddam,
Yeah.
the State Board of Ed, the Town Board of Ed, and fundraising. So that's their funding sources, and then they give us a breakdown as to how they allocate it.
And your utilities are $8,000 a year in that little house?
Yes,
Needs some efficiency.
yes.
Because you can use that money elsewhere.
Yeah, and the challenge is that, do we put money into a house that we're already growing out of? Or do we eventually, figure out a way to move into something that's gonna allow us to grow as needs?
Well, I guess a dumb question. Oh, was it last fall, an agency, the Eversource came to the town and said, hey, first volunteers will come do an energy assessment of your dwelling. Did you take advantage of that? Maybe you should.
They're gonna tell us what we already know. It's poorly insulated. It it's a lot of work.
But they'll insulate it for you, you know
They'll
that?
come and do stuff
Oh,
for
will
you.
they do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's not a
And
bad
very
idea.
low cost, I'll tell you, I highly recommend them. So if you cut 8,000 by 2,000, there's gotta be
You
lots of
have to
opportunity in the
camper.
house to cut the 8,000, I'm struck by the $8,000 bill.
Yeah, well, keep in mind, I mean, that also includes, our internet service, we're with Comcast, so it includes the phone and the internet and the cable and all the stuff that we keep running. It includes, both the electric and the heating. So that there's more than just,
I advise you to take a close look at your utilities bill.
all right,
Maybe there's some savings there.
all right.
And I encourage you to use the Eversource contract. They do.
That's not good, that's actually a good idea. I mean, it's something I hadn't thought of.
That's all I have, thank you. Is that the Russians?
I think it's you. When you flipped the pad is when the noise went.
I don't think
I think so.
Might be that one right there next to Todd.
It's the ghost.
That one's live. We thank you very much, and
Thank you.
thank you for your service to us also.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much, I
thank you.
appreciate your time. Have a good day.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, lunch is coming. I ran into
You're-
Zach out there.
You're welcome to join us if you like.
Oh, no, thank you.
Cindy, question on that, so, because I'm looking at the rest of the schedule, will lunch be served, is it, you're just checking?
I'll go double check right now.
All right, so before we adjourn for lunch, what I'd like to do is just kind of go over the rest of this day. It looks like we've eliminated public safety and fire as questions for Tuesday. The only thing we have, because if we can get our work done today, it would be ideal, right? Does anybody see an objection to that?
Could I make a suggestion?
Please.
If there's not any, from my perspective, any reason for all of us to come and Beth Lunt to come when she can write us a letter.
Well, my thought is, we might even be able to communicate with her today. Perhaps I can ask Cindy to reach out to her or Emmett and have a conversation with her. And we might be able to ask her some questions today that we can put to the record and at least do that. And ideally, if we can, because your questions were specific to one certain thing, right? Cindy, is it possible at all to reach Beth today to answer a question and avoid having to have her
try
come
to
on
call her.
Tuesday?
Actually, I have two things, Bill. One was the road, the other is the repair and maintenance line item. What is that?
The details of such.
Yeah.
All right, so if you have those two questions addressed today, that might be satisfactory, and we may not need to have a meeting on Tuesday.
The only concern I have about Tuesday is there may be people that wanna come and make public comment. They can't be here today. If you advertise that meeting time, the people, I think, may have
I
allocated.
think we advertise it as if necessary.
Okay, that's fine, did that.
Am I correct by making that statement? Didn't we?
You are, but this agenda doesn't say vote on the budget.
It does not?
I'll ask Deb for her take, but I think usually we do a vote on the budget line item.
Yeah, and you're a special meeting, so you can't add it.
Okay,
Sorry.
so, all right, so then that sells that.
But you could also be prepared for if you won't go to
So
really
the Tuesday
late.
meeting would include a response to that question. Unless we get an answer today, I wouldn't mind getting it done today.
Mhm.
Then it would be quickly, it would be basically audience comment, and then us voting on the budget. It could be a very quick
Correct.
meeting, correct? Any objection, any problem with that? So ideally, I'd like to go through all of that. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take a motion to recess. Anybody wanna make that motion for lunch?
So moved.
Second?
I second.
All in favor? Let's go.
Aye.
All right, so it's now 12:20. Let's go a half hour. Is that enough?